Hey everyone, hope you are doing good. So my name is Nikhil and in this video we will be creating a MERN Stack project with advanced authentication and authorization technique. So it's an advanced login and the sign up application project where we will be building the most secure application in which we don't share any information like the tokens to the front end, because everything is accessible on the front end. So instead we will generate the http only cookies to send the tokens, and then we will just encode the data into it, and then we will fetch the user's detail from that token, and then we will provide the user the access to see the details. And if you are a complete beginner, then still you can take this course, and this course I have made it to the complete beginner friendly. And if you are already a MERN Stack developer, then you wanted to learn the authentication and authorization techniques, so this course is for you as well, and I will teach you how to build the complete secure backend. So let's see the demo of this application. So this is the application which we are building. So we have a screen and then we have a navigation bar, and once I will click on the login, now you can see the login tab will appear, and then we have some text boxes inside that. And once I will go to the inspect to check the console, and then you will see the initial state of the Redux is false. Once I will click on the login, now you can see we have my details. And now once I will click on the network tab, now you can see we have the user details, and it is now getting the details. And now you can see we have a cookie which is not accessible on the front end. So if we will access on the front end as the document.cookie, so then you will see we have empty string because we cannot access the cookie in the front end. And then we have the logout screen as well. Once I will click on the logout, and then you will see now we are logged out. And once I will go to the users page again, so to see my details again, now you will see it will show us that the no route match to the location as the user, because these all are the protected routes. And then we have here the backend running on, and then we have the front end running on, and then we have the models of the user, and then we have the controllers of the users. We have some controller functions, and then we have the advanced routing here. First we have the post request of the sign up and the login, and then to get the user, first we will verify the token, and then we will get the user. And then after the user's token will expire, so we will generate a refresh token. So the token will be refreshed from this token, and then we will just get the refresh token, and then we'll verify the token again, and then we will show the user their details of the get user routes. And then we have a logout as well to verify the token, and then we will remove the token from the cookies. So these are about the backend. And in the front end we have the MaterialUI, we have the Redux. So here we have the Redux slice, we have a slice, and then we have a header, we have a navigation bar there, we have some routes, and then we have the app.js where we are rendering some routes like the header. We are rendering the header for every route, and then we are handling all of the routes there. And then these are the protected routes, so if the user is not logged in, so we can't see the user route. And then we have everything working fine. So this is our application. So let's start building the application, and for that we have an introduction video as well. So let's start with the introduction. So before moving ahead, let's see some introduction about some topics which we are going to use in the application. So the MERN Stack. So MERN Stack is the combination of the MongoDB, Express.js, React.js and the Node.js. MongoDB handles the database operations, and Node and the Express.js handles the server-side task, and the React.js handles the front-end tasks. So what is the MongoDB actually? So MongoDB is a NoSQL database which stores the documents in the collections instead of the records and the tables in the SQL. So about a collection, so collection is like a collection of multiple documents inside that, and a document is a record inside a collection. And if you are coming from the SQL database, then you can relate to the table as a collection and the record in the table as a document. So about the Node.js, so it is a JavaScript engine which was originally built for the browser, but now can work without a browser as well, and having some extra APIs inside that. And now it is known as the Node.js, and it allows us to run the JavaScript outside of the browser now. So initially it was just built for the browsers only. And we can see about the Chrome's V8 engine. So it was like the Chrome's V8 engine that we use, but now it is being maintained as a standalone project called the Node, and then it have some extra APIs as well to use the JavaScript outside of the browser as well. And now about the Express.js, so it is just a framework for handling the server-side task that helps the Node.js to ease the process. And then it contains some controller functions as well. It contains the routing, so like it contains all of the HTTP part as well. So now about the React.js, so the React.js is just a JavaScript library to build the fast and the scalable user interfaces. and it is a view part in the MERN stack, and the models and the controllers comes in the backend parts, and it all combines to the MVC, which is a model view controller application, and it is then combined to the MongoDB. And now the main topic of this project, which is the authentication and authorization in the MERN stack. So about the authentication, so it is the process of verifying the user. Like we verify the user by its credentials, like its email and the password, and if the credentials are correct, then we just authenticate the user. And then we have the authorization. So it is the process of providing the access to the user for some specific application after the authentication. So in simple words, authentication is the process of verifying that who the user is, and while the authorization is just a process of verifying that for what they have access to in our application. Like we can just provide the access to the user to see just the details of it, but not to modify it. So we have some authorization part, like for what part of application we provide the access to the user. So now, why do we need the authentication and the authorization? So we need the authentication and authorization to verify and provide the access to the user for the application. Like we cannot provide the access directly by knowing the password and the email. We just do the authorization as well to provide them the access. So now, how to authenticate and authorize the user? This is a very big part. So first, we verify the user's credentials, and then we give them an access, and then we set the token expiration time. So first we will verify the user's credentials, and then after the credentials are correct, then we will provide the access token to the user, and then after the access token is granted, then we can just set the expiration time for a specific token. But wait, what is a token? So tokens are used to provide some access, and in this project we will use the JWT, which is a JSON web token, which is a library to use, and it encodes the JSON data into a signed token, which is shared between the two parties, which are the backend and the front end. So it creates an encoded data of the JSON which we will be providing. Like we can provide the ID of the user, the name of the user inside the JWT, and then it encodes that data, and it provides the user that token that it contains your crucial information, and don't give it to anyone. So this is about the token, and then we'll be using these tokens. And now we need to share the access token. So we share the access token with user after the credentials are true, and then we need the token back from the user again. So once we will share the token with the user, now we need the token back from the user to verify the details, and then to send them the details. So after we will get back the token, and when we will verify the token, so then the verification completes, and then we will provide the access to the user. So about the access token cycle, so we will generate the token, and then we will send the token inside the HTTP only cookie. So after the verification is completed, we generate a token, and then we will send the token inside the HTTP only cookie, and these are the cookies which will be set it from the backend, not from the front end, and then it will be added to the request headers, which will not be accessible to the front end. So any front end user cannot access that cookies. And we are using the HTTP only cookies because of knowing the XSS attacks nowadays, which is the cross-site scripting attacks, where the attacker adds some malicious code to your website, and the attacker can steal your token as well, and then it pretend to be you, and it can do any harm to the application and for your data as well. So we don't share the token with the front end, and we just add it to the request, and then we will just get back the request from the user via the server side only. So it is not accessible to the front end overall. So the front end cannot access the HTTP only cookies, and then the browser sends back the cookies to the backend. So this is possible just because of the axios. So axios allows us to send the credentials which we will receive from the backend to the backend again. So it will be done with the help of the axios. So we will use the axios to do that. And then we have the application parts. So first part we have the backend, and then we have some front end, and then we are connected with the API calls. And the backend is built with the NodeJS, the MongoDB, the Express.js, and with the JWT, which will send the tokens, and with the Bcryptjs, where we will hash the password, and we will just encrypt the password of the user. And then we are using the .env as well to protect some variables, some key variables from the code, and we will add to the environment variables only, which will be only accessible by the process.env. And then we have a front end application, and then it is built with the React.js, and it is built with the Redux. We will add the Redux for the authentication states, and then we will add the React router, and it will handle some routes, and we have some protected routes as well. And then we are using the axios to send the request to the backend, and then we are using MaterialUI, some components of the MaterialUI to make some stylings in the application. So this is all about the introduction. So let's start building the application. So now after all that discussion, now we can start building the application. So now we will create the backend application first. So I have opened a folder in the Visual Studio Code, and now we have to go to the terminal, and then we need to select the new terminal from there, and then we need to install the Node.js application. And to install that, we have to enter here the command as the npm init. So after entering this command, then you will see there will be some questions like the package name of our application. So you have to press enter, and then you will see we have the version. So initially we will be having the version as the 1.0.0, so we have to press enter again. And then the description, we can provide here the description as well, but I will not provide here. I will press enter. So then you will see now we have the entry point, so we can change the entry point to the app.js, and then we have a test command, but we can skip all that. So you have to press enter again and again, and then license here, and then you can just press enter again. So after this, you will see there will be a package.json file into your directory. So the npm init command creates a package.json file which have all of the information about your application, like the package name, we have the MERN auth, we have the initial version of the 1.0.0, description. For now it is the empty string, but we have the main file as the app.js, and we have the scripts as the test, and then we have the author and the license. So we have all of the details of our application. So now we can just create a new file as the app.js to create just a hello world application. So first we need to create the as the console.log, and it will be the hello world. So if I would now save, now we need to run the application. But now how we can run the application? So as of now, we don't have any service installed like the NodeMon, which will automatically identify the file changes. So we can just run the app.js with the node app.js command. So you have to enter this, then you will see now there will be the hello world on the terminal. But now we can just create some commands, like there will be the start command. And for the start command, we have to write the NodeMon. So as we have discussed in the introduction video that what is the NodeMon, so we have to use here the NodeMon, and then we have to install the NodeMon as well. So now I have entered the command as the NodeMon as the app.js. So it will automatically detect all of the file changes via the NodeMon in the app.js directory, in the app.js file. So we have to just save, and then we have to install the NodeMon as well. So it will be npm install as the NodeMon. So we have to wait now till it installs in our application. So now the NodeMon has been installed, and to verify that, then you can go to the dependencies and you can check the dependency as the NodeMon. So we have installed the NodeMon, and now we have the start command as the NodeMon as the app.js. So now we can just run the app.js with the NodeMon. So we have already created a start command here, so we can just write the command as the npm start. So it will automatically start the NodeMon here. So this is a command which will start the application from now on. Now you will see now we have the hello world, and then you can see there is a new console log that clean exit waiting for the file changes. So whenever any file changes will happen again, like we have the hello world, and then if I will add the exclamation mark after that, so then you will see the NodeMon will automatically detect the file changes again, and the hello world is being printed with the exclamation marks. So now we have completed the installation of the NodeMon. So now the initial application is working fine, and now we can just go and we can just install the Express.js in our application. So we can just stop this terminal by pressing the Ctrl and the C, and then the terminal will be stopped, and then we can just install the Express. So it will be npm install as the Express. So the Express will be installed, and we have seen about the Express, that what is Express, why do we need it, in the introduction video as well. So we have to install the Express. Now you can see Express will also be installed in the dependencies, and now we can just create a basic application with the Express as well. So it will be, so now to create a new Express.js application, I will now remove this, and I will first import the Express.js. So it will be the const as the Express. It will be equals to require, and the require is used to import some files in the Node.js, like we have installed the Express.js. So we have to get the Express file also from the Node modules, and now we have the Express, and now we have to add here the variable as the app, and it will be having the whole app functionality inside it. So app will be equals to the Express, and the Express will give its reference to the app.js now, and the app variable now holds all of the functionalities within the application. So now we can just write here the app dot use, and the use is used to add a middleware for that, like middlewares for the routes, middlewares for the connections, middleware for everything. So we have here the app.use, and then we have a default URL, like whenever we will opening a port on the localhost or anything, so it will be the default route, like we don't have anything after that slash, so it will be the default route. And then we can add here the request, response, and the next as the parameters. So it will be the request, response, and the next. And then we can use here the response dot send. So we have to send here something on the server. So response dot send, it will be equals to, like, we can send here the hello there. So now we are sending, but now where is this server? So we have to create here the server as well. So it will be the app dot listen. So this server will be then listen to the localhost port 5000. So we have to specify the port here. So we have the 5000 port, and then we can also add a callback function here. So it will be an arrow function inside that, and then we can just add here the console.log that listening to localhost 5000. So if I will now save, now we can see in the application if it is listening to localhost 5000. Now it's yes, it is listening. So we can just go to the Chrome to see if it is sending the hello there as well. So we can just go to the localhost at the port of the 5000, and to check, now you can see it is sending us the hello there on the localhost 5000. And if you will change the route here as the anything, like it will be the API, so we have to go to the API. So if you will just refresh it again, now you will see it will show the cannot get, but when you will go to the slash API as we have defined, then you will see, so it will show us the hello there in the Express.js application. So now we have created a basic server with the Express.js as well. And now the next step is, now we have to remove all of this because it is just a basic application and we don't need to use it in our main application. So we can just remove everything from there. So the Express.js will be there only for the import statement. And now we can just go to the MongoDB to install the MongoDB packages. So first we need to go to the MongoDB to create the database. So we can go, and then you can see there will be the link of the MongoDB, the application data platform. So we can just click on that link, and then we can just click on the sign in to sign in for the MongoDB. So we have to wait. So then you will see there will be an option of the login with Google. So we have to try this, or if you have the email or the password associated with the MongoDB, so you can just try with the email and the password. But I will now go ahead with the Google. So now you will see I have the previous databases here, but now I will start from the new project. So we have to go to the new project. So we have the new project here, and then we can just create a brand new project for our application. So the name of the project will be like the MERN auth, and then we can just create here the next, and then you will see now we have the set permissions, but now we can just skip that and we can just click on the create project button. So it will create a new project for us in the MongoDB. So then we can just set up our cloud database as well. So now you will see there is an option to build a database. So we have to click on that option, and then you will see now we have three options. Like if you will opt for the serverless, then it will cost you around $0.30 per 1 billion reads. And then you will see there is a dedicated as well, and then you will see there's a shared as well. But if you want to try with the free, and you can try with the free by clicking on the shared cluster, so you can just create here from the free as well. So now I will go ahead with the free as well. Now you will see now we have the default options. So I will now go with the default options again and click on the create cluster. So the new cluster is being created, and then you can see now we have some options like username and the password. So we can add a username as the admin, and then we can just add any password here. So I will just generate the secure password from the auto generate option, and I will just copy that password. So we have to save this password because there is no option, I think, to just reset the password again. So I will now just save here the password, and then now we can just create a new user. And then now you will see now we have some environments like where we want to connect. So I will add here the IP addresses, but now we can just skip that because we need to access from everywhere. So we can just go to the database access. Now you can see now we have the admin user, and then you can just edit the options as well. and then we have the network access, and you can just add here the IP address from below option. So you can just click on the add IP address and you can just add as the allow access from anywhere. And if you want from only the specific IP address, so you can just add your current IP address as well. So if you will add from the current IP address, so it will be only accessible from your current IP address only. But now for now I will now click on the allow access from anywhere and I will now confirm. So then you will see now the changes will be reflected within few moments. And then once you will go to the database, now you can see we have the database deployments, and now it will be deployed within 0 to 3 minutes. Now you can see 1 to 3 minutes it will be installed. Until then we can just go and we can just install the Mongoose. So we have seen about the Mongoose in the introduction video, that what is the Mongoose and why do we need it, because it provides us as access to just interact with the MongoDB. So it is very simple and it is very easy to use to interact with the MongoDB database. So we have to just install the Mongoose. So we have to go to the terminal again, and then we have to run the command as the npm install as the Mongoose. So the Mongoose will be then installed in our application, and then we can just connect our application with the Mongoose and the MongoDB. So they all will be connected. So the Mongoose package is now installed, and we can see the Mongoose in the dependency section as well. Now you can see now we have the Express, Mongoose and the NodeMon, and then you will see now the database is also deployed on the cloud. So now the first step would be connecting our application to the database. So now we can just connect our application with the MongoDB database, and for that we need to import the Mongoose here. So const as the Mongoose will be equals to the require again as the Mongoose. And then we need to provide the app as well. So const app will be equals to the express again, and we have to give all of the express functionality to the app. So it will be the const app equals to the express, and then we can just use the Mongoose so to connect to the database. So it will be the mongoose dot connect. So the connect function is used to connect to the database. So first it needs a URI, which is the string. So we can just go to the database cloud as well, and then we can just click on the connect, and then we have to click on the connect your application, and then you will see now we have the Node.js selected from there, and then we can just copy here this URI. So this is a URI which we need to pass there. So it will be in the quotes. So now you will see it is now passed, and then we can use here the then statement after this, because it is a promise. If you will hover over it, now you can see this is type of a promise. So we can just add here the then statement as well. So whenever the connection will be succeeded, so we can just create here the then, and then we can just add some functionality here like then. So once the application will be connected to a database, then we have to open the server like app.listen on the port of the 5000, and then we can just add here the console log statement as well, like the database is connected and I'm listening to localhost port 5000. So this is the console log which I need to enter here, and then you will see now in the connect function, now we have the MongoDB, and then we have the password. So this is not the password which we need to use, so we have to replace this password from here, and then we need to write the password which we have copied from there. So we have to write this password after the admin/:, and then there is a new thing here which is the my first database. So this is the default database which will be created by the MongoDB. So we can just change this if we want to change our database name, like I will add as the MERN-auth. So this will be my database name, or I will now add this to the auth. So this will be my database name as the auth, and then you will see we have the connection, and then we can also provide the catch statement. So if there would be any error while connecting to the database, so we can just console.log the error which we will receive from the parameter. And if I will now save, and if I will now just start the server again from the npm start, so then now you will see the database is connected and the connection is successfully created, and it is listening to the localhost 5000. So now everything is working fine, and now we need to build the functionality of our application. So now the application is connected to the database, and now we can build the full functionality of our application. So first we need to build the folder structure. So first I will create a folder here, and it will be the model, and the model will contain a user model inside that. So we can just create a file as a user.js. So it will be the user model, and then we can just create another folder. So it will be the routes, which will contain all of the routes of the user. So we can just create a new file as a user dash routes.js. So this file will contain all of the routes from the express.js, and then we can build, and then we can create another folder here as the controllers. So it will be the controllers. So the controller folders now we have created, and this folder will handle a new file inside that. So it will be the user dash controller.js. So this file will handle all of the controlling operations of the routes. So once the user will go to the route, and then we need to write the controller functions here. So these are the functions which will control the routing operations. So now we have created the folder structure. So now we can just go to the user, and then we can just create here the model for the user. So the model of the user will contain some things, like it will be the first we need to import the Mongoose to create the model. It will be the Mongoose will be equals to the require, and it will be the like the Mongoose. And then we can just use here the schema. So we need to build the schema of the user first. So it will be the const at the schema is equals to the Mongoose dot schema. So we are now referring the schema to the Mongoose dot schema, and then we can just create here the new schema by having the new instance of the schema class. So we can just create the schema as the const user schema, and it will be equals to the new schema of the MongoDB database. Now we have the new schema, and then we can write here the objects inside that. The first property of this schema will contain here the name, and it will be of the type of the string, and then it will be the required field in our object. So it will be the required, it will be the true. So now we have the name, and the field name is equals to the string. So it is now showing you the true string, but it is not the true string. So the name is the string, and then the required field is the true, and then we need to write here the email of the user. So the email, and it will be of the type of the string again, and it will also be the required. So the required prop will also be the true here. And then we need to write another prop as the unique, because every user will have a unique email ID. So we will add the unique prop as the true. And then we need to add the password field. So the password field will contain the type again as the password. So it will the type as the string. And then we can just add here the required prop again. So the password is a required field, and it is equals to the true. And then we can also add a one more field here as the min length. So the password, so the minimum length of the password will be equals to the, like we can add here the 6 for the minimum length of the password. So this is our schema of the user which we have created now. So it will have a name, will have an email which is of the type string, and it is also the unique email. So if the email would be repeated again, so the Mongoose will throw us an error. And then you will see we have a password end also. So now we can just export the schema as the module dot exports, and it will be equals to the Mongoose which we have imported dot model. So the model creates a schema, and then it will export the schema. So we need to provide a name as the string. So it will be the user, and the U will be the capital, and then the schema. So schema we have already created as the user schema. So the variable user schema will be there. So now this will export the mongoose.model as the user, and in the Mongoose it will be stored as the users, because there is a default naming convention in the MongoDB database. Like if you will add here the user, so it will be stored as users, because the first letter will also be the small case letter, and then it will add here the plural form inside the MongoDB. So all of the models name will be on the plural form in the MongoDB collections. And now the schema is created, and now we can just go to the user routes to create here some routes. So to create some routes for the user schema to interact with the database, so we can just create here the routes. So first we need to do we need to import the express from the require as the express again. So after importing the express, now we can use the router. So we have to declare a variable as the router, and it will be equals to the express. We have imported the express, so the express has a function of the router. So now we can use the router, and now this variable holds its reference inside that. So now we can just create some requests. Like first it will be the router dot get. So we can just create a get request for the HTTP, and then the path will be like there will be only the default path which we have, and then we can just add there a function like the request, response, and the next, as we did in the basic application from the express. And then we can just send something like response.send, and it will be equals to like the hello world. Now we need to export the router as well. So it will the module dot exports will be equals to the router. So right now we only have the one route, but later we will have more routes there, and then the all of the functions like this, like we have defined the callback function. So all of these function will be then in the controllers file. But now to just test the application if it is running or not, so we can just define here the router.get, and it is just a simple hello world, and then we are now exporting the router as a standalone module, and then we can just go to the app.js to import the router. But with the const router will be equals to the, we can import the router here from the require again. So the require, and it will be in the, I think it will be in the routes dash, we have the user routes file. So now user routes file is being imported, and now we can just create here the middleware for us. So we need to create the middleware as the app.use. So by default URL will be like the backend or like the API. So we can add here the API, and then we can just add here the router. So it will be the router. So now the router will handle all of the operations after the API there. So it will be there as the, so we have to add here the API as the slash API, and then this will handle all of the routing operations after the API. So if I will now save, so now if I will now just go to the Chrome to test again, so now we can test the application by going to the localhost at the rate 5000. So then you will see now it is showing us the cannot get, but once we will go to the API again, so it will show us the hello world there. So now it is sending us the hello world. But now for all of the operations like this, like we cannot go to the Chrome again and again, so we need to install something, like we need to install the Postman, which is like a API testing tool. So we can just install the Postman from there. So now you will see now we have the Postman, and then we can just download there the Postman from this link. So I am using the Windows operating system to use the and to create the REST API. So if you are on the Linux or in the MacBook, so you can just try out with your supported operating system, but I am on the Windows, so I will try out with the Windows. So I've already installed it in my machine, so I don't need to install it again. So you can just install and you can just open the Postman for the routes. So I will now go to the Windows, select the Postman to test the route. So now you will see this is the screen of the Postman, and then we can just enter here the URL as well, like it will be the http/localhost, and it will be a port of the 5000 and /API. So once I will click on this send request, and you can see this is the get message also. So then you will see it will show us the hello world. So now the basic application has been created, and now we can start building the real routes for the HTTP request. So I will now delete this route from here. So we have to create a new route for the sign up functionality. So first there will be the sign up functionality. So it will be the router dot post. So it will be the post request, and then we can just add here the slash, and it will be the sign up. So it will be the sign up, and we can add a controller function after that. So we can just go to the controller, and then we can just define here the controller for the sign up function. So first it will be const as the user, and it will be equals to the require. So first we need to require the user model which we have created. So it is in the model, and then it will in the user. So we need to import this user. Now the user is imported, and now we can just create a first function which is a sign up. So it will the const sign up, and it will be equals to a async function, and it is a asynchronous task. So we have to define here it as a async function. So first it will contain the request, then it will contain a response, and then the next, the request is like which we will get from the client, and the response which we will send from our server, and the next is used to just move on to the next middleware after the certain task. So now we have created the sign up function, and now we need to create the user. So to create a new user, now we need to create here some fields. Like first it will contain the const as the user, so it will be the new instance of this user, and then we can just add here the object. So first now you can see now we need to provide here the document, and for the document first we need to provide here as the name which is provided there. So the name will come from the request.body. So the request.body just like contains a key value pairs of the data which is submitted in the request body. Like we will submit the request body from the Postman, and then in the JSON format, so it will contain a key value pairs of the data. So like we are now giving the name as a request.body, so it will contain a key as the name. So we need to provide the name as the key, and then we can also provide some, so if we can see about the email and the password, so we need to provide the email and the password as well. So we can just go here. So after the name we have an email, so the email will be having an email field, and the request.body.email. So now we have the email, and now we can also define the password. So it will be the password as the request dot body dot password, and then it will create a new user for us, and then we can just use the try catch block to save our users. Like it will be the try, and then we can just create the await, and then the new user which we have created as a user dot, it will be the save. So save is a function which is available in the Mongoose to save a document in the database, and then we can also write here the catch statement as well to catch if there is any errors. So we can just catch the error, and then we can just log it in the console, so it will be the error. So now we are saving the user into the database, and then we can just return something like return at the response dot status as the 201 which is created, and then we can just create here the JSON, like it will contain the message as the key, and then we can just add here the new user which we have created. Like we can also send the user which we have created there, so it will be the user. So now we are now sending the HTTP request for the sign up, and this is like a user, and it contains the request.body.name and the email and the password as well. And then now we are now saving the document into the database with the user.save function which is used to save the document, and then we are now returning the status of the 201 as the JSON which is equals to the message and the user. And then we can just export this function as well, like exports. It will be the exports dot the function name, like the sign up will be equals to the sign up. So now we are exporting the sign up function from there, and then we can now just go to the user routes, and then we can now import the sign up function from here. So it will be the sign up. So now you will see the sign up is imported from the user controller, so we can use the sign up here. So if I would now save and if I would now go to the Postman once again /API and / it will be the sign up. So now we need to, so now this is a post request, so we need to select the post from this drop down, and then you will see there is a route as the sign up, and then we can just add here the JSON body here, like it will be the raw, and then it will be the JSON from this drop down. And then you will see now we have some fields, like we have the name, so we can have a name, like I will provide my name here as Nikhil, and then it will be the email. The email we can provide as nikhil@gmail.com, and then we can also provide a password. So the password will contain any password, like I would give a 12356 because the minimum length is the 6. So now if I would now send the request to the database, now we should see the success message. So sending the request to the database. So now there is an error, but what is an error? So we can see in the console, and now we have the unhandled promise rejection warning, like there is an error. So this error, because now it is showing us that they cannot read property the name of the undefined, because now the server doesn't know that which type of data it is expecting from the client. So we need to add here something to the server, like it will know that only the JSON data will be expected to the server. So we can use here the lab.use add a middleware. So this will be a middleware, and then we can use here the express.json. So we are now sending the JSON data from the client, so the server then will know that the type of the data is the JSON data, so we can just accept that. So if I will now send the request again, now you will see the request has been sent to the database, and then you will see now we have all of the fields of the user, but we have two new fields like ID and the V. The ID, it is like the ID which the MongoDB gives us. So now this means that our product is now successfully sent to the MongoDB, and it is giving us the ID in return. And then you will see the status is also the 201 which is created. So if you are not sure that the user is now in the MongoDB, so you can go to the MongoDB, and then you can just search for the user there. Now you can just click on the browse collections, the collections which we have, and then we can just go to the I think the users collection we have. Now you can see the auth is a database and the user is a collection. Now you will see now we have the database user inside our collection. Now we have the user. So now the sign up functionality is completed, but there is one thing which you need to add the validations after that. Like you are just declaring a user as the new user, and you are now providing all of the details there. And if you will provide the user as the same email, so it will throw us an error because we have not defined the user there, but it will still send the request to the database. So we can just stop that, and we can just validate before it send the request to the database, and then we can just return something like this email is already there. So we can just add here some validations after that. So we can just create a variable as the let as existing user, The existing user will be by default an empty value, and then we can also destructure the request.body from there, because we don't need to write always the request.body. So we can just create an object, and we can just destructure all of these fields from the request.body, like the name, like the email, like the password, and it will all be coming from the request.body. So we are now destructuring everything from the request.body, and instead of this name and the request.body.name, so we can just remove the name and the email and the password as well. So now we are sending the name as the name, and the email and the email, and the password and the password. And then we can also remove this name and the name here also, because and the ES6 provides us a new way that if your key and value pairs are of the same variable name, so you can just define as the same thing, like the name, which I will provide as this. So it will be acted like the name colon the name, the key value pair. So we can just provide here the name and the email and the password here, and we can just remove the password from here. So now you will see, so we have destructured successfully all of the details. So now we can just create a validation, like we are now defining the existing user. So we can just write here the try catch block again with that try, and then we can just check the existing user, like if the existing user, so we can just check in the user model which we have. So it will be await function, because it will await for the task, and it is an asynchronous task. So it will be the user model which we have imported, and then we can just call here the function as the find one, which will find a record in the user. And then we can just add an object, and then you will see it will be having a filter query. So we can just add a query, like if the email is already there in the email in the MongoDB, so we can just check that field, like even if we provide the catch as well, like it will the error. So now we are now checking if the existing user is already there in the Mongoose database, in the MongoDB database. So we can just check, like if the existing user is there, so then we need to just return as the response.status will be equals to like the 400, and then we can just add a JSON message also, like the message will be there as the user already exist. So it will be a message which will be thrown with for the validation purpose. And else after this, after checking this, now we can just add here the user which is equals to the new user, and then we can just try and catch with the statements, and then we can just add here the return statement, like the return status equals to 201. So if I will now save, now we have added some validations here. So now if I will now send this record again to the database, now you will see it will throw us a message that the user already exists. So now we can see we have the validation of the user if the user is already exist. So we can just now register the user again. So we can just add a functionality like the login instead. So we can just build here the login functionality after the user has been created. So after that, if I will now just send again, now you will see the user already exists and the login in state. So now the user is there, and now we need to build the login functionality, like the user will be logged in now. So we can just create here the user functionality as the login. So now before moving ahead to the login route, we can see that we are storing the same password in the database which we are receiving from the request.body. So if I now send a new request to the database, a new sign up request, and if I now click on the send, now you can see now we are getting the same password which we are now receiving from the user. But it's not a good option, like if by chance our database is hacked. So we will be exposing every details of the user, including the password, to the hacker, and now hacker can do anything with that. And we have another use case that if we are building a backend server, and suppose we have a team which is working on, so we can't share the password of the users with our team, and it is confidential information about the user. So what we would do in both the scenarios, so it's not the right way of storing it in a database. We have to see the solution that how can we store the passwords. So the solution can be, we can just encrypt the password of the user, and then we can store it in the database so that it can't be directly exposed in the database. And it will be a hashed string, and it will not be easy for the hacker to decode it. So we will encode the password, and the hacker needs to decode it to get the user's details. So that's the right way of storing in the database. But now, how do we encrypt that? So for that we can use a package name which is the Bcryptjs to just encrypt and then decrypt the password for checking the user information. So I will now go and if I will now install the Bcryptjs from there. So I will now stop this terminal. And now we have to install the Bcryptjs npm install as the Bcryptjs. And now the Bcryptjs is now installed, and then we can go to the user controllers, and then we can see that whenever we are sending a new sign up request, then we should now encrypt the password using the bcrypt. So first we need to import the bcrypt, so it will the const as the bcrypt will be equals to require, and then we will be requiring the Bcryptjs from there, Bcryptjs. So now we have imported the bcrypt. Whenever we are storing a new password, so then we can just create a hashed password before that. So if the existing user is there and then we are sending a response as the 400 and we are sending a message as the user already exists and the login instead. So here after that we can just store a password as the hashed password. So it will the const as the hashed password, and it will be equals to the bcrypt which we have now imported, bcrypt dot hash sync. So we have a function which is the hash sync, which is a synchronous way of hashing the password. So we can just hash here the password, and then we can just store the password as the hashed password instead of the direct password which we are now getting from the user. So if I will now save and if I will now just restart the application by writing the npm start, and then we can just check again in the Postman. So if I write a new email like this, like nt@test.com, and I am sending the password as the 123456, and if I am just sending a new post request, now you can see the password is different. Now you can see now we have a hashed password in the database. So this is what we wanted. Like we don't want to expose the password to the hackers, even to our team as well. So we want to store it as a hashed password so that it would be very difficult to encode this password. So it's the right approach. Now the sign up functionality is completed, and now we want to log in the user. So for login we can just go and then we can just create a new route in the user routes, and it will be a login route. So it will be a new post request from the router. So it will the router dot post, and it will be a request to slash at the login. So this will be a login route, and then we can just declare a function, and then we can just use that function within this route. So we can just go to the users controller, and then we can just create another function which will act as a middleware. So it will be the const as the login, and it will be equals to the function as the request response and the next, and this will be an arrow function once again, and this will also be the asynchronous function because these all are the asynchronous tasks. And then same we can get the details of the user via the request.body. So it will the email and the password. So we need the email and the password for the login functionality. So we will be getting it from the request.body again, and then we can just check, like we can just now declare a existing user again, like let existing user, which will be equals to, like by default it will be undefined, and then we can just use here the try catch block, and then we can just check if the user exists or not. So it will be existing user once again, existing user will be equals to the await, and then we can just find one record again, like it will the user model dot find one, and we need to pass a query here in the object, like the email would be the email which we'll be using, like email will be equals to the email, and then if the user will then find the request, and then we can just log in the user. So now here in the catch blocks, so we can just return the error, like return new error, and the new error would be the new error which we are now receiving from the try catch block. And now when we have the existing user, so we can see if we don't have the existing user, and we can just return the server with the response dot status, and the status would be 400.json. we need to send the JSON again, and it will be like the message, and the message can be anything like the user not found dot, and it will sign up. So we are sending a message as the user not found and the sign up please. And now we can see, and now we have hashed the password of the user. But now how can we check the password? So now we can see if the existing user is not available, then we are returning the response.status as the 400, and we are sending the message as the user not found and please sign up. But now how do we check the hashed password with the actual password of the user? And the solution is very simple again. So we can compare the password with the bcrypt again. So the bcrypt provides us a way to just hash a password. So it will be the const as the is password correct. So we can just declare a variable as the is password correct, and we have a function in the Bcryptjs like compare sync, which just synchronously compare the password and then returns a boolean. So we can just use that. It will the bcrypt dot compare sync, and then we can just use that, and then we need to pass here the password of the actual password. Like there we are now sending the password which we are receiving from the request.body, and then the second parameter is from which password we need to compare. So we need to compare it with the existing user dot password. So the existing user, if we have the existing user, then we should have the password as well, and then we will compare the existing user with password. So then we can see if not, so that if the password is incorrect, then we can just return again like the return response dot status, and it will be equal to the 400 once again as the unauthorized, and then we can just send again the JSON again with the message, and the message can be again like the invalid email or the password. So then we will send this request, but no. So if the password is now correct, then we can just return the response dot status as the 200, which is the success, and then we can just send a JSON message once again as the message, and the message would be like successfully logged in. So we will send this message to the user if everything is okay. So if I will now save, and if I will now just try out sending the request, and before that we need to just export this as well, like it will be the exports dot, it will be the login, and it will be the login function which we have now created. So it will be the login, and then we need to use the login in the user routes as well. So it will be the login. So if I would now save, and if I would now check the request again, now I will now test with the sign up. So first I will now sign up the user, like it will be the sign up. So it will be the post request, and the URL will be the localhost @5000 port, and then plus sign up, and then the request.body would be, we need to send the raw once again, the text we need to send the JSON, and the JSON data will contain a name of the user. So we need to send here the name will be like Nikhil. I am sending my name once again, and I am sending email as the email, and the email would be like nikh@test.com, and we are sending the password as well, like password, and the password would be, I am sending the 1 2 3 4 5 6. And if I now send the new user to the sign up request, now you can see, now I think there is an error like 4 of 4 not found. So we have to see what is there with the request. So unexpected JSON token at the position 7. So it will be the API, and then we need to send the request. Now you can see, now the response is successful. Now the response is the 201 which is created, and then we are sending a Nikhil, and then Nikhil@test.com, and we are storing the hashed password. But now we can just check the same details with the login now. So we can just now create a login request. It will be the login HTTP request, the URL will be the same, and then we need to just remove the sign up from there, and then we need to enter the login there, a login, and then the body will contain again the raw, and it will contain the JSON format once again. And if I will now just add here the JSON, so I will copy this and I will paste this here, and if I will now just send the request of the post, and we should see the success matches. Now you can see, now we are successfully logged in to the database, and now the status is also 200, which is okay. So now we have completed the login and the sign up. And now we have successfully created a login and the sign up functionality in our application. And it is good to see, as we have stored the hashed password, and now the password is fully secure, and we can also log in. But now what do we need to do after the login? So we need to authorize the user. Now the authentication is done, and now we need to authorize the user. So after the login, we need to provide user the access to use our services, of our application services. But how do we provide the access? So we can provide a token to the user to provide access, and that token will be very confidential, and it will contain the details of the user like ID or the email. And after a specific time, the token will be expired, like after an hour the token will then expire, and then keep the user logged in into the application. So we can just regenerate the token and keep the user logged in, and we can also destroy the access of the user as well. But we can generate a JWT token, which is a JSON web token, and I'm sure you have heard before, which will help user provide some access to use our application. So for example, like we can generate the token. Now user have to provide us the token to get the details. Like for this application we will just show user the details of the user, like its email and the password. But if you are working with the big application, then you can offer services after the login and the authorization, only when the user will then provide you the token. So the user will provide your token and then you need to offer the services to us. So now we can generate the token. So for generating the token, we need to go to the application once again, and then we need to install a new package. It will be the JSON web token. So this package will help us to generate a JWT token to provide the access to the user, and this token will provide the access by encrypting the details like the ID of the user. So now let's start generating the token for the user to provide the access. So now in the users controller, when we are declaring the login and when we are using the login, so after the password is correct, then we can generate the token to the user. So we can generate the token by just importing the JSON web token first. So it will be the const as the JWT, and it will be equals to the require, and the require will then contain a JSON web token. So now we have imported the JSON web token. So now after the user details are correct, so after everything is correct, so we can just generate the token. So now we can generate the token after the password is correct. So it will be the const as the token. So this is the token variable which we will generate, and then we have a function in the JWT to generate the token, and it is the sign. So it will be the JWT which we have imported dot sign. So we have the sign function which signs the token to the user. So first, the first parameter contains a payload which can be a string, an object, or it can be a buffer as well. So the payload contains a data which we need to encode. So it can be an object. In this case, like we can just encode the ID of the user by providing the existing user.id, and the second parameter is the secret key. So this is very important. So we should have a secret key, and you need to make sure that this key is not shared with anyone. So this is a fully secret key which is used to encode this token, and with this secret key only then we can decode the information as well. So you need to make sure that it is not accessible by anyone except you or the team. So it will be a secret key. So by default now we can generate a secret key at the constant here, but I prefer you, and in the end we will just store the secret key in the environment variables by creating a .env file. So we will store the secret key there, but for now only, now we can generate a constant as the secret key, like it will be the JWT secret as the key, and it will be equals to, like, secret key can be anything, like it will be the my key or anything. So in this case we can now declare the secret key as the my key. So there, after we are signing the user, then we can add the secret key as it will be the JWT secret key, and then we need to add another parameter, and it will be a object. And now we have some options, like we can define the algorithms like HS256, HS384 and any algorithm. So by default it is the HS256, so we can use that. And then we have audience, we have the encoding, we have the encoding properties like JWT ID, key ID, and we have a lot of properties to use. But here in this case we will just use only one property, which is expires in. And the expires in property you can see here, like example equals to 60, like it will be a time span. It can be a 2 days, a 10 hours, or the 7 days as well. So this is the property expires in which we need to use, and the expires in property will define that after how many time span, after how much time the token will expire. So in this case we can just use as the 1 hour or the 2 hours or the 3 hours as well. So after that the token will expire, so then we can use this expires in there. So now we have generated the token after the login, and then once we will get the information of the user, like we are now only defining the login route, but whenever we want to verify the token, then we can use another route here by defining here the user route, in which we will send user their information, and for that first we will verify the token which we are now sending here. So now we are sending the token, and now we can just send the token whenever the user will be logged in. We can send a message, and then we can send the user as well, like the existing user is there, and then we can also send the token as well. So if I will now log in again, so if I will now see if the token is sending or not, so we can start the server, like a database is connected. And now if I will now just send again the login request, so now you can see now we have some information. Now we have the message which is called a successfully logged in, and then we have the user, and then we have the every details of the user including the password, and then we have the token as well. So now this is the token, and it is very big token to just decode. Then you will see this is the algorithm used as the HSA256 to just encode this token, and this token contains the ID of the user, so it is encrypted ID. So now we have the token after the login, and now where do we use the token to authorize the user? So we can just go to the user routes, and then we can just declare another route where the user will ask for their information, like for example the email or the password or for the name. So we can just declare a new route for the router at the router.get, and in this get request user will ask for the information like slash, it will be the user, and then here there is a tricky part, like here we need to first verify the token which we have sent through the login. So to authorize the user, now we have to just access the token of the user which we have now sent. So we need to provide the access token to every request after that. So we need to then verify the token, and then we need to just share the information to the user. So first there will be a new middleware as the verification of the token, so we can just create a new function after that. So it will be as a const as the verifyToken, and it will be equals to like the request on the response and the next, and then this will be an arrow function once again, and this will act as a middleware again, and then we need to send the token. But now how we can send the token and how can we just get the token? So we can send the token now in the authorization tab. Here now we have some types, so we can just select the types, and then we can just select any of the type. But in this video we will go with the bearer token, so we will send a bearer token with that, like we have the token same, it will be copied there, so we need to remove that. So we will use the bearer token with that, and now to access that we need to get the token. So it will be like the const as the headers, and it will be equals to the request dot headers, and it will be equals to the authorization which we have. So it will be the authorization, so the spelling should be same as the authorization. So now you can see now we have the request dot headers authorization. So if you will just console.log the information of the headers, so then now you will see. So I am now just console.logging the information, and then we will now just exports dot as the verified token, and it will be equals to the verified token once again, and then we will use that same into the user routes as the verified token first. For now we are now using only the verified token, so now I'm sending a get request from there. So the URL should be the same, so after the login it should be the user, and then it will be a get request, and then we need to select the authorization, and then we need to send the bearer token. And for the bearer token which we have received the token from after the login for only this user, for only nikhil@test.com, so this token is only valid for this email ID. So then we can just use this token. So I have now copied, and then we need to go to the get request, and then we need to select the authorization, select the bearer token, and then we need to paste the token here. And if I will now just send the request there, now you will see now we have the token which we have now sent, and it is the same token. Now you will expand, you will see in the end there is a 5OGA, and we have the same token here, and then we have a bearer in the front as well because it's a bearer token. So now we have the access to the token, and now we need to verify the token. So after that we can just verify the token. So we can just retrieve the token from this bearer token by just splitting the token. So it will be the const token, and it will be equals to the headers, and it will be dot split. So we will just split the headers into the space, and then we will access the first number index from there. So we need to access the token, so it is a 0 index, it's a first. So this just splits the string into the arrays, and then we are now sending the arrays at between the spaces. So it will be acted as a 2 arrays, bearer and this token, and then we are extracting the first index element, and then now we have the token, and now we need to verify the token. So it will be, so we can check like if we don't have the token, so then we can just send a request at the response dot status as like the 404, and it will be dot JSON, and it will be like the message, like the string, it will be no token found. And then after we have the token, and then only we can just access the user. So to verify the token we have a function again in the JWT to verify the token, and it is a JWT.verify, and then it is a verify method. So we need to add the token. So we can just convert the token into the string, so it will be the token, and then we can just use the token there. So after that we need to provide here the secret key again, which we have generated there. So we have generated the constant as the JWT secret key. So then now you will see, now we have the token, and then there can be a callback function after that, like completed or not. So we can just generate a callback function. So the first parameter is the error. So if there is error in validation of the token, if like the token is wrong, and then we have the error, and then we have the information like decoded information. So we can use here the decoded information as the user, because we have generated the user ID with that. So we can just give here the error function after that, and then if there is an error, and then we can send the message at the response.status. It will be equals to the 400 at the unauthorized, and the JSON which contain a message inside that. Message can be like invalid token, or after that, after we have sent the request there, and then we have the user. So if it is not there, so we can just return here as well. So if it is not there, so then we can use the user. So now we have the user which have the decoded information. So if you will just console.log the user there, user.id, which we have then encoded into that. So if you will just console.log, and then you can try again with that. So if I will now send the request again, so I think there is an error. So now you will see, now we have the unexpected end of inputs. So I think there is an error, because now we have now generated the exports.verifyToken there. So after that we need to just add a libres there. Now you can see, now the application is started, and then we can just generate a new get request. So click on send request. Now you can see, now we have the database is connected, and now we have the ID of the user. So now we have now verified the token, and now the token is correct, and now we have the ID of the user, and then we can just move on to the get user, and then we can generate another middleware function to get the details of the user from this ID. So now we have successfully decoded the token from there, and then we can just get the ID of the user by going to the user routes. So we can generate the new route after that. So it will be the const at the get user, and it will be equals to the request response and the next, and it will be a asynchronous task, and then it will be a arrow function. So before that we need to send the ID of the user to this middleware. So for that we need to just send here the request.id. So we can generate any of the parameter, any of the name or variable with that, with the request object. So request.id, I will provide here the user. User will be there, I think. So it will be the user request.id. It will be the user which we have now decoded .id. So we have now sent the request.id as the user.id, and then we can just move on to the next middleware after that. So we can just use the next middleware, and next, after the authorization, after the verification is completed, and then we will move on to the get user function. So we can just get the ID of the user from the const as the user ID, and it will be equals to request.id, which we will receive from the parameters from there. And then we can complete this by generating a let as the user, and it will be like the undefined by default. So then we can just use the try catch block once again. So I will now expand this. So now we have the try catch block, and then we can generate as the user will be equals to await, and then the user, we have the model of the user dot find method. So we will find the user by its ID from the find by ID method, and then we can generate the ID, and then we can just send the ID which we have got from the request.id, and then we need to get all of the details instead of the password. So we can use here the minus sign and then the password. So it will just remove the password field, and it will send all of the data of the user from that. So now we can just get the user, and then we can use the catch block also if there is an error. So we can just return new error as the error in that. And now we are using try catch block, and then we can just validate again, like if we don't have the user, and then we can just send here as the response as the return at the response dot status again, and it will be like the 404 because we don't find the user. And then we can just send the JSON once again, like it will be the message as the user not found. So now we are sending the message after the validation, and then after everything is fine, so we can just return as this response dot status, and it will be the 200, and then .json we can send the user. So it will be a .json, and then we can send the message as the user only. So now we are sending the user. So if I will now just export this as well, exports dot, we have now get user will be equals to the get user function once again. So then after that we can now use this in the user routes, and then we can generate the so we can just get the user route by the get user. So now we have exported that, and then we have imported there. So after the verification of the token, and then we'll move ahead to the get user with the next function, and then we will get the details of the user. So now we have provided the authorization again because the validity is 1 hour. So if I will now just click on the send, now you can see now we have the information of the user. So now because we have decoded the token, we have now got everything, and now we have completed all of these steps in the JWT, and now we have our fully secure application, but one thing missing, which you will see later. And then now we are getting the user object with its ID, with its name, with its email and everything, instead of the password, because now we have now excluded the password from the user controller. So now we have provided everything, and now everything is working perfectly fine. And there is something which you need to know. So now we have completed the JWT part, and this is the way in which the modern applications are created. So they just encode the information of the user, like the ID or anything, like the user ID, the user's ID, user's email or anything, with the JWT token, and then they decode it, and then they try to get their information from it, and then they will get the information, and then they will retrieve the information to the user. So this is how the modern web works. So now we are providing the token for every request, and it is a very good approach, and it is a modern approach as well. So we can store the tokens into the local storage of the browser, or into the sessions, or into the cookies, or into the memories as well. But is this a good solution to store the token in the memories in the browsers, where all of the JavaScript code can be accessible to you via the developer tools? So is this a good approach? But then where can we store the token in the front end? So if you will store the token into the local storage, so I am now currently into the MaterialUI website. So if you will check the console, now you can see, if you will just click on the local storage, now you will see now you have accessed the local storage of the browser. And then if you will store the token into the cookies, like it will be document.cookie. So the cookies will also be accessible to you. And if it is accessible to you, then it can be accessible to any hacker as well. So you can go to developer tools and do certain things with your application, and it can break your application as well if any hacker will steal your token. So here comes a new topic. So are you getting my point? So where can we store the tokens? So in the modern web applications, we also have a new threat called the XSS attacks, which are the cross-site scripting attacks, where the attacker or the hacker adds a script to your application and pretend to be you, and it can steal your access token, and then can do plenty of the things which are not good to your application, and then the application can be hacked, and then it will be bricked. So this is a big problem. So where can we store the access token if we have the hackers onto there? So the solution is we still have a solution, is we can store it in a cookie. But wait, the cookies are accessible to the browsers, but this cookie will be made from the backend, and it will be an HTTP only cookie. And I have done a lot of research on this before creating this project, and I came to know that storing the access tokens in the HTTP only cookies is the most secure option to secure the web applications. But how does all that work? So we store a cookie from the backend, not from the front end. And we store a cookie from the backend, and then we will send it to the front end. And then the cookie will not be accessible to you. But still a problem that if it is not accessible to you, then where do we send the access token? So in the front end, whenever we are sending the request, we will send the request from the axios. So the axios provides us a way where we can send back the HTTP only cookie, which we will receive from the backend to the backend again. So we will receive a HTTP only cookie from the backend to front end, and then after every request after that, so there is an option in the axios, so we can just send back the same cookie again, but it is still not accessible to you. So it can be a very good solution, storing the HTTP only cookie and getting the cookie back from the client, and then verifying and then providing the access to the user. So that's a lot of discussion about that. So let's move ahead. So Postman have a default settings to send back the HTTP only cookies. So we will test it on the Postman first. And then if everything will work fine, and then we will get into the front end, building the front end application. And then we will use that with the React and the Axios. So now to use and send the cookies, we need to install a package named cookie parser. So it will the npm install as a cookie dash parser. So after this package, we need to use the cookies, and then we can just import the cookie parser here as the cons as the cookie parser, and it will be equals to the require, and then we need to add here the cookie parser after the require. So now we have imported the cookie parser, and now we need to add it into the middlewares as well. So before any middleware, so we can use here the app.use, and it will be the app.use, and it will be the cookie parser. So we need to add here the cookie parser, and then we need to call this function. So now we have now imported the cookie parser, and then we can use the cookie parser in our application. So now I am restarting the application again, and then we need to go to the user routes. After the user is logged in, so after the token is created, and then we can just set that the response dot cookie, and it will be the function to add the cookie. Now you can see response dot cookie. We can provide a name of the cookie, then we can provide a value, and then we can provide some options in the third parameter, and the options can be like maximum age, the expires, like when the cookie will be expired, and then the sign is true or not, and the path. So we can just add these things. So first it will provide a name, so we can just add a name as the ID of the user. So we can just add the ID like we have the existing user dot underscore ID. So this is the ID, so this is the name of the cookie, and then the value of the cookie would be the token. So we will send the token, and then we will check the token of the user after the cookies, and then we can just add here some options in our object. So at first it will be the path, and the path will be can be just it will be the by default blank path, and then we can just add here the expires, and the expires will be there, and then we can just add a new date here. That's the new date, because it's need the date in the expire. So when the expired will be there, so we can add a date dot now in the new date. So it will provide a number, and then we can just add, like if we want a cookie for just seconds, so we can add the 1000, because 1000 milliseconds is just 1 second. So we can just add the cookie for 30 seconds for now, and then after that we need to add the HTTP only. So if I do not provide the HTTP only in that, so then it will be accessible to the front end, but we need to provide the HTTP only also. So it will be the HTTP only, so we need to provide it to the true, and then we need to provide one more property as the same site. So for the security reasons, we can provide the same site and give a value as the lags. So now we are sending the cookie. So now we are sending the cookie with the response.cookie after the token is created. So if I will now save, and if I will now just go to Postman to send the request again, now I'm in the Postman, and now we need to go to the login route, and then we have the authorization, and my token is now expired, which I sent with this. So if I will now send this again, now we should see the cookie there. Now you will see, now we have some data that the user is successfully logged in, and then we have token. And then if you will go to the cookies tab, now you will see we have a cookie, like the name of the cookie is the ID of the user, and then the value has the token, and then we have the domain of the localhost, and then we have the path, and we have the expires in property also, like it will expire after 19 March after just 30 seconds, and then it is the HTTP only cookie, because we have not provided the HTTP only, and it will not be overall accessible to the front end. So now we have provided the cookie. So now we have set it up the cookie, and now we need to get the cookie in the verify token, because then we need to verify the token as well. So we have specified the cookie for just 30 seconds, and then we have specified the JW token for 1 hour. So we can just increase or decrease that to the 30 seconds as well. So the 30s, so it will be added to the 30 seconds, and then we need to go to the verify token now, and then instead of these headers, we can now just remove these headers, and then we can just comment all of the functionality for now in the verify token. So we can just comment it out, and then in the verify token, now we have the cookie in the request.headers. So we can just get the cookie like cookies, and it will be equals to the request.headers. Now we have the cookie in the request.headers, and it will be the cookie. So we can just use that cookie, and then we can just console.log that variable as the cookies. So now let's see if we are getting the cookie back in the request or not. And then first we need to just log in the user again, for the 30 seconds because the user will be expired in 30 seconds. So we can just send the request again. Now the request is being sent, and then we can just use that get request again for the user. And then we need to remove this bearer token as well. Click on the send. So now you can see, now we are getting back the cookie after the request, and the cookie will be equals to, like you can see, it is the ID equals to the token. So now everything is working fine, and we are getting back the cookie in the request.headers. So now we have the cookie, and now we can just split the cookie with the equals to sign, and then it will be divided into two parts. So we can just get that. So it will be the const as the token again, it will be equals to the cookies we have dot split. So now we have splitted the cookies, and we need to split it with the equals to sign. So it will be the equals to sign, and then we need to get the first index. So it will be the we need to get the first index after that, and then we will get the token. So if I will now just console.log the token again, and if I will now just send that request for the login again as the post, again get the token, send. Now you can see, now we have the token which we have received from that Postman. So now we can just take all of the things again from the headers. So we can just remove from the headers there and this const token again, and then you can see now we have everything working fine. And then we need to just uncomment everything, and now you can see now we have the token, and now we are now splitting the token with the equals to sign. Then we have the token, and then we are already verifying. If we don't have the token, then we have to send the response.status as the 404, and in the message we have to send that no token found. And then we can just check in the jwt.verify that if we have the token, if it is equals to the token, and if the verification is successful, then we can just return we can just check the user.id which we have decoded from there, and then we can just attach the ID to the request, and then it will be equals to the user.id which we have decoded. And then we are moving on to the next middleware, and the next middleware we have the get user, because now we are already getting the user ID from the request.id, so we don't need to change this at all. So if I will now save all of the things, and if I will now just go to the Postman once again, set the request after the login, send the user, we have the token, send the get request again, and then we should see the user. Now you can see now we have the user, and now everything is working fine. And now if you will wait for 30 seconds to see if the token is expired or not, so we have to wait for 30 seconds. So we can just wait. I will stop the video and I will just continue the video after 30 seconds. So now after 30 seconds, now we can check again. So if I will now click on the send request, now you can see cannot read properties of undefined, and now you can see the token is being expired, and now everything is working fine. And now we are setting up the cookies after the user is logged in, and the expiration time is just 30 seconds, and the cookie will also expire in 30 seconds. And then we are just verifying the token to get the user, and then we are attaching the request.id to the users.id, and then we are fetching the user. So now everything is working fine. And if I will now just click on the get user again, and then you will see the cannot read properties of undefined because now the token is expired. But if I will now still log in again, if I will now get the user again, and the user will be there because now the user is currently logged in, and now it will be expired in 30 seconds. So everything is working fine, and now you will see we are getting the token and the ID as well. So now everything is up and running, and now we need to build the front end to test it on the front end if it is working on the front end as well. And after the front end will be created, so we need to keep the user logged in again because we can't keep the user login for just 30 seconds. So we will create a refresh token after the routes. So here we have some routes, like first we have the post route for the sign up, then we have the login, then we have the get the user where we are first verifying the token, and then we are getting the user. And then after this we will create a new route for the verify token after the front-end application, because when the user will be logged in, then we need to keep the user login after the 30 seconds as well. So we need to create a verify token if the user is still there on the website. So now let's start building the front-end application, because now the backend is now over, and the only thing which is remaining is the verify token, and this part will be built up after the front end. So now let's start building the front end with the React. So now we can build the front end, and I will now create a new folder as the backend, and I will now move every folder and every file there to the backend. So it will be gone to the backend then, and then we will just fetch everything from the backend after that. So the package.json will also be from the backend. So now we can just create a new React application there with the npx create -react -app. So the name will be like the front end. So we need to build this application. So now we have created the command to install the React application, and now we need to wait till the React app is installed. And now the React app is now installed, and now we can move on to the frontend folder. So it will the cd to the frontend, and now we can just start the application from the npm start, and then the application will be up and running with this command. So we have to wait till it compiles and till it loads the React app for us. And now the React app is now compiled and it is up and running, and now we can just go to the front end. We can just go to the source, and then in the app.js, then we can remove some unnecessary code from there. So we need to remove from the header till the header, and I will also remove the class name equals to the app, and then we can also remove the logo as well. And then we can just go to the index.js also. We can just remove the report web vitals, and then we can also remove the import as well. And then we can just go to the app.css to remove the basic styling, and then we can just also go to the index.css also, and then we can just remove everything, and then we can just add the star with the margin, and the margin will be 0 because by default the margin is the 12px on the browsers. So we can just remove that, and now we should see there should be nothing on the screen. And now in the app.js we can just add here the hello world. So to the hello world, and now we can save. Now we should see the change onto the screen. Now you can see hello world without any margin or without any padding from there. And now we can install some packages, like we can install the MaterialUI. So we need to go to the MaterialUI to install that. So we can just go to the very first link of the MaterialUI, and we need to get this command to install that. We can just stop the server again, and then we can just add the command as the npm install MaterialUI. So it will be installed. Until then we can just create the folder structure, like in the source we can create a components folder, and then we can build the components first, as it will be the header.js, and then there will be the login.js, and then there will be the signup.js as well, and then there will be the welcome page as well. So it will be the welcome.js. So in the header we will just click on the buttons like the login and the sign up, and then the login and the sign up components will appear, and then we will just, and then after the successful login we can just go to the welcome page. So first we will build the header. So I will add the basic setup of the React application by the RAFCE command. So then now we have the header, and now we can just use the header into the app.js. So we can just import that. So it will be the header. So the header is now imported, and then we can just save the application to see the changes. We can just start the application again as the npm start to see the changes, and then the header will be there onto the screen. And now we have the header onto the application. So first we need to go to the header, and then we can just remove the header from there, and then we need to import something from the MaterialUI. So we need to import something from the MaterialUI. So it will be the UI material, and then the something will be the app bar. So it provides a basic structure of the navigation bar, and it provides a blue background color onto that. So we need to just import the app bar from there. So we can use the app bar here as well. So it will be the app bar, and then you will see inside of this, if I will now add the hello world, so there will be the hello world inside the app bar. So now if I will now save, now we should see the changes onto the screen. And now you can see it is compiled, and now we can just go to the header. Now you can see now we have the hello there, and then we can just add the toolbar inside that, and the toolbar provides us a styling inside the navbar. So by having the toolbar, it will just increase the size of the main header, which the header looks in the real world applications. And then we can just use here the toolbar, and then we can just add something like that, the typography inside that. So the typography allows us to add some text inside the MaterialUI. So it will allow us to add some text, and then we can just provide the variant as well, and the variant defines as the which type of tag do we use. So we can just provide as the h3 as the heading, and then we can just add the heading as the MERN auth. So we can just save that, and if I will now save, now you can see we have the MERN auth, and now we have created the header with the MaterialUI. And then after that we can create a box like a div. So the box in the MaterialUI just act like a div. So we can just add a div inside that, and then inside this div we can add some tabs, like we can have a tabs. So the tabs is used to provide some tabs in the MaterialUI, and then we can just have the children tab inside that. So this tab is the parent tab, and this tab is a child tab inside that. We can just remove that, and then we can just add here the symbol tab I set, and we can just import that also. And then now we have them tab, and now we can provide the label as well of the tab, and the label can be equals to, like we can just provide the label as the login, and then we can provide a one more tab here as the, and it can be a sign up, so it will sign up, and then we can just save. Now we can see, now we should have the tabs as the login and the sign up there. And once we can click on the login, now the login screen should appear, and then once we will click on the sign up, then the sign up screen should appear, and then we can just move that box onto the right. So we can just move that, so it will be the so it will be having the SX prop to add some styling into that, and the styling can be the margin left, so it will be the auto, so it should move to the right, I think. So now you can see, now we have the login and the sign up, and now it is moving to the right. So these are as the links, and we can just provide some colors into that, like it will be the text color into the tabs, so it will be the text color, and we can provide as the inherit, so it will be inherited from the background. Now you can see, now we have the login and the sign up buttons inside that, and now the tabs are working, and now we can see the tabs with the colors, and now we can just add a indicator color to the tabs. So we can just add a value to the tabs, like we can define a value of the tab. So if we will define a value as the 0, so it will start from the children, like this tab has the 2 children, so it will start from 0 index, and it will act like an array because the tabs are now children of this tab, so it will start from the 0 children, from the 0 index from the children's. So if you will just add the value as the 0, so this tab would be highlighted because it acts like an array. So now you can see the login is now highlighted and the sign up is not highlighted, but if you will provide the value as the 1, now you can see the sign up will be highlighted. So we can just change that. So after the tabs, we can provide an on change function also, like it the on change, and the on change can be a function, and then we can just use the state here to change the state of the login and the sign up there. So we can use the use state snippet, and then the first it will be the value, and then it will be the set value, and by default it will be undefined, and then we can just use here the on change, and it will contain an event. So it will be an event, and after the event it will contain a value as well from the material UI. So we can just set the value of the tab as the material UI value. So if I would now save, and the value can be like, we can just have the value of the value which we have defined in the state. So if I will now save, now we should see the change onto the screen. So now once I will click on the login, now you can see the login will be highlighted, and once I will click on the sign up, the sign up will be highlighted, and then we can just add some colors as well. So we can provide here the indicator color. So if the login is highlighted, so we can just add the underline after the login. So indicator color would be secondary from the material UI, so it will be like of a pink color. So now you can see the login is highlighted with that, and the sign up is also highlighted with that. So now everything is working fine till now. So now everything is working fine, and all of the things are now highlighted. So now we have built the header, and now we can build one more functionality. So once we will click on the login, so we need to go to the login route, and for the routing functionality in the React application, we know that we need to install some package, and so we need to install the React router DOM, so we can use that. And if you are using the yarn, so then you can use with the yarn add, but I'm using the npm. So I will now copy the package name from there, and I will now add the package there. So after selecting the new terminal, going to the front end, we can install the npm install React router DOM. So now the React router DOM will be then installed. So we need to wait till it complete the installation. So now the React router is now installed, and now we can use the router, and then we can see in the package.json also if it is installed or not, and we can see the version as well of the React router DOM. So it is now installed, and now we can just go to the index.js to use the routing, and we need to wrap the app component with the browser router, which allows us to add the routing functionality over the app functionality. We need to get the browser router, and it will be imported from the React router DOM. So we need to wrap everything from there to the here inside the React application, so that the routing functionality should be there inside that, and then we can just import the browser router, and it will be imported from the React router DOM. So now you will see it is now imported, and now we can use the routes inside the app.js now, and then we can just go to the app.js, and inside this div, I will now remove this div with the header. So it will be the header tag, and then we can use the header inside that, and the header will be available in every route. So after that, we can just define a main tag in the HTML, and then we can just define a parent tag also. So it will be the react.fragment, and the react.fragment is like a wrapper which will wrap all of the components inside that, because the rules of the JSX, so it should be having only a single parent. So now we are using the main, and then we can import the routes. So we can import the routes, from the React router DOM, and then after that routes, we can use the routes. We can just add here the single route, which is the child route inside that, and then we can just provide here the path of the route like slash as the login. So in this login, we can just use the element. So the element would be the login component after that. So it will the login, and then after that we can create another route, and then it will the route again, and then the path will be equals to the slash sign up with the React application, and then we can provide the element as the element would be like the we can add the sign up element, and then after that we can provide another tab like it will be the route, and path will be equals to the user. So the user will be having an element will be equals to the welcome. So in the welcome page we will show the user. So then we can define these components as well after that. So we need to go to the login.js file which we have, and then we can just set a basic setup after that RAFCE, and then we have a login, and then we can have a sign up. So RAFCE with the sign up as well, with the welcome as well we need to add the RAFCE. So now we have defined the welcome page also, the sign up and the login page also, and then we can just import that also. From the login we can import the login, from the sign up we can import the sign up, and from the I think the welcome we can import the welcome as well. So if I will now save, now we should see the changes onto the screen. So now you can see once I will move on to the login slash login, so there should be the login page. I think the content is hidden because of the bar, so we can just go to the header, and then we can just remove the position of it. So the position would be equals to the sticky, so that it should be sticky to the top only. So now you can see we have the login because the position was fixed, so the login was behind the app bar. And then now we can see if we can go to the sign up, so we should see the sign up page. Now you can see we are into the sign up, and if we are going to the user, so we should see the user details over there. Now you can see now we have the welcome page onto the user. So now everything is working fine. So we can just fix that header, like once we click on the login we should reach the login route, and once we will click on the sign up then we should reach the sign up. So we can just fix that functionality. So here in the tab, so we can just add a component as the link component prop. So it will be having a link component, and then we can just add a link component as the link, and it will be imported from the React router DOM. So we can just add here as the link. So we can provide the two because the links in the React router DOM receives a to prop, and then we can just use the to prop here in the tab now, and then it will be the login. So it will be acted like a link component now, and the same we can just use that component into the sign up as well. So it will be the to and the sign up. So it will be then moved on to the sign up. So once the tab will be clicking on the login, so it will reach the app component once again, and if the path is equals to the login, it will then render the login component, and the path, if the path will be equals to the sign up, then it will render the sign up, and if we have the user path, then it will show us the user welcome. So now we can just remove that also, and now you can see now we are in the default application, and once I will click on the login, so now you can see we are reaching the login route, and once we will clicking on this sign up, so now we are on the sign up path and without refreshing the page. And this is the big advantage of the React router DOM, that we can now use the routing without refreshing the page because it's a single page application. And now we can build on the sign up functionality first, so we can just build that. So we can build the sign up forms here, so then we can just use the form tag here as the form, and then we can remove the action also, and then in the form we can use here the box to provide some styling, and then it will contain the text field from the MaterialUI. We'll then import it from the MaterialUI, and we need to import the box as well from the MaterialUI. So the text field is now imported, and then you can see now the text field is there, and then we can just provide another text field there because we have the 3 text fields over there. So the text field 2 and then the text field 3. So now we have the 3 text fields, and then we will having the button over there. So it will the button, and the button will also be imported from the MaterialUI, and it will contain the sign up there. So now we are in the sign up, and now you can see now we are in the box, and then we have the 3 text fields, and then we have the sign up, and then the type of it will be equals to the like submit because we are in the form, and then we can just add the on submit to the form also. So when the form will be submitted, so we will be having a function to control the submit, so we can just add a handle at the submit, so we can have this function as well. before that. So we can have a const as the handle submit will be equals to the function. Now you can see everything will work fine. So if I will now save, so now we should see the form over there. Now you can see now we have the form, and now we will have some styling over the form, like the text field will contain the margin as the normal, and this will also contain a margin as the normal, and this will also contain the same as the margin as the normal. So now we have the margin, and then in the box we can just provide the display as the flex, and then we can just add a flex direction to the column. So if I will now save, now we should see the change onto the screen. So now if I will now save, now you can see now we have the text fields, and now we can just define the size of the box also. So it will be the width prop into the box, so the width can be equals to like 300. So if I will now save, now we should see the form as the 300 pixels, and then we can just add a margin left, so it will contain the margin left, so it will contain the auto, and then we can also provide the margin as the right, and it will also be the auto. So it will be in the center onto the screen. Now you can see now the form is in the center, and then before the form we can just add the typography as well to add there, like typography like it is a sign up, and then in the box we can just add the justify content also, like justify as the center, so the form will be aligned into the center, and the align items will also be equal to the center. So now we should see the changes onto the screen now. So now you can see now we are in the sign up, and now we can just add that typography with the variant will be equals to the h2, and then the variant will be added inside the box. So after the box we will be having the variant. So now we should see the changes onto the screen. Now you can see now we have created the sign up form, and now we need to design the text fields of the form, so we can just define that. So the variant will contain as the outline, and then we can just add their placeholder would be like we can define here the name, and then we can define here the values as well. So but we can define the variant and the placeholders to there as well in the text fields there. So it will be having a variant outline and the variant outline there also, and the name it should contain the email, and it should contain the password. So now we should see the changes onto the screen. Now you can see now we have the name, we have the email, and we have the password into the forms, and we have the button as well of the sign up, and then the button can contain a variant again will be equals to like the contained. So the button will be filled up with the color. Now you can see now we have the sign up functionality over there. Now the sign up functionality is completed. Now the form is now designed, and now we can just use some state to control the form. And to use the state we can just move on to the React application once again, and we can define here the state. So we need to define here the use state to handle the form. So the use state would be there, and we can define some inputs to the form, like now it will be having a inputs, and then there will be the set inputs, and then we will be having an object. So the initial value of the state will contain a name, and the name property will be equals to the empty string, and the email as well, it will contain the empty string, and the password as well, it will contain the empty string. As of now we are now defining the state with the empty string, and then we can define a values to the text field also, like it will be having a value of the inputs that we have, inputs object state dot name, and then inside the value here, so it will be equals to the inputs, and it will having inputs dot email, and then we will be having a value again to the password as well. Inputs will be equals to the inputs dot password. So now we have seen everything, and now we can define a on change functionality also for that. And for the email we can provide the type also, like it will be after type of the email, and for the password the type will be the password of that. So I think the password field is there, so we can define a type as the password. So now we have defined everything. So now we have defined 3 text fields, and then we have defined a button to sign up, and now everything is working fine. Now you can see now we have the name, email, and the password field, and now we can define a function to change the values of the text field. So we can define a on change. Start with the on change. So whenever the change will occur, so it will be having a on change function, so it will the handle change, so it will the change the values of the inputs. So we can define a on change after their text field as well, after this text field as well, and after this text field as well. So now we can define a handle change function, so it will be the const as the handle change will be equals to the function, and it will be having a e as the parameter, and then we'll be having all of the things there. And now we should see the changes onto the screen because we have defined some function, and now everything should work fine. And now we need to handle the state into the handle change function. So for handling the state, we can define an identifier to the text field, like we can just identify the text field with their name or with the id. So we can define a name as this, and it will be the name, and then we can define here the name as the email, and it will be having the password, so it will be the name equals to the password. So now we have defined the identifier of the text field with the name, and then we can just check, and we can just set the state from there, like the set inputs. So it will contain the previous state, so we need to just render the previous state first for it, and then it will be having the previous state first. So it will be having an object with the previous state, and then we will be having the state here with the actual state. So here we will target the property names like e dot target dot name, so the name of the text field, name of the input, and then the e dot target dot value. So if you don't know about this technique, so you can just console.log it. So if you will just console.log the e dot target dot name and then the value, so it will be the e dot target dot value. So whenever the field will be changed, so it will just target all of the things. And now we can just go to the screen, and we can just go to the inspect to check if everything is working fine. You can just go to the console. Now you can see, once you will provide the name like ABC, now you can see the name, we have the name of the name, and then in the email, once you will get anything, so you will get the identifier of the email as the name, and the value is equals to the a, and you can just check the identifier of the password, and the value equals to the SSS. So now we can just see everything is working fine here, and then we can just handle the states here. So now you can see we have defined here some states, and we can just remove that console log here. And now you can see once the handle submit would be there, so it will contain an event inside that, and then we can just prevent the default behavior of the forms in the HTML, that once we will click on the sign up or any submit button, so it will send the form data and it will just refresh the page. So we can just prevent the default functionality from the prevent default function. So we have a prevent default function, so it will just prevent the default functionality of that, and we will just console.log the inputs that we have. So we will just console.log the inputs of the form that we have. So we will just refresh the page, and then we can just check again, like the name, I will add my name Nikhil, email as the abc@test.com, and then we will have a password like 123456. So if I will now click on the submit, now you should see the changes. Now you can see, now we have the name object with the name as the Nikhil, the email as the abc@test.com, the password equals to the 123456. So now everything is working fine, and after that we can just send the HTTP request. So now we can send the HTTP request there, and for that we can just install the axios from there. So we can install the npm install axios to send the HTTP request. So the axios is now installed, and now we can send the request. So we need to go to the handle submit function, and then we can just send the request here. So we can just create a function to send the request at this send request, and it will be equals to an async function. So it will be an async function, and then we can just send the request from this function now. And now we can just declare a variable as the const as the response, and it will be the response which will send the request to the server. So it will be equals to the axios which we need to import. So the axios will be then imported. So we need to import the axios from the axios. So we can import the axios from axios, and then we can use the axios to send the request. Like axios have a post function, so we can send a post HTTP request. So the URL will be http/localhost, and at the rate of the port of the 5000 / we have the API / in the sign up. So now we are sending the sign up request, and in the second argument then we need to send the data, and the data will be equals to which we need to send the data as the request.body. So it will be the name. We need to send the name as the inputs dot name, and then we can send the email as well. Email equals to the inputs dot email, and then we can send the password as the inputs dot password. So we will send the data now in the request, and then after the response then we can add a catch statement of it also, because it is a promise. So we can have a catch statement, and we will have an error in the parameters, and we will just console.log the error which we have. So we are now sending the error, and then we are now console.logging the error, and then it will be an asynchronous task. So we need to add the await as well. So it will be the await, and then after the request then we can get the data from the request. So the request, so to get the data from the request we can declare a data variable, and we can just get the await as the response which we are sending dot data. So the response dot data is the property in the axios which gives us the data in the response which we will receive from the backend. And now after this then we can just return the data over there, return data. And then after that in the handle submit function now we can send the request. So it will the send request. So we need to call the send request function, and then after that we can just redirect the user to the login. So after this sign up is completed then we need to redirect the user to the login. So we can use the history to redirect the user. So we can just declare a history variable, and the history will be equals to the use navigate hook. So we have a use navigate hook from the React router DOM, so we can use that to declare the history. And after the then statement we can use a history as well after the then inside that, and there will be a callback function, and we need to call the history. So history will be there, and after the history we need to redirect user to the login. So now if everything would work fine then we will be redirected to the login. So if I will now save, and if I will now just go to the React application once again, now you can see I will now refresh the page, and I will now just clean everything from the console. I will add the name as the Nikhil once again, the email as the nikhil@test1.com, and the password will be 123456. If I will now click on the sign up, so now we should see all of the details, but I think there is an error, and this error is because we are now sending the data from one server to another server, and the another server don't allow us to accept the data from the different server. So we need to allow that access because it is a access control allow origin, and we need to add it to the allow origin to from anywhere. So we can just access the allow from anywhere. We can just use the codes from the backend. So we need to stop the backend server from there, and then we can just go to the backend application in the app.js, and then we can just install the course. So we need to install the course package to just remove this error, and the course package will allow us to just allow access from anywhere to the origin. So we can use the course as well. So const course will be equals to require, and the require will be having the course. So now the course is now required, and now after the app.use, so before every middleware, so we can use the course. So it will be the course. So we need to run the course function which we have imported. So now after all of this, if I will now just save, and if I will now just start the server of the backend again, and now we should see everything should work fine now. So now the database is connected listening to localhost 5000. Once I will click on the sign up, so now you will see everything is completed, and now we are redirected to the login, and now the user is already created there. And now we need to build the login. So now the sign up is also done, and now we need to build the login page. So we need to go to the I think the login.js to build the page. So we can just get the layout from this sign up as well. So we can get the sign up layout from the inputs to handle change, and then all of the data from the sign up. So we can just paste that to the login. So now I have now pasted to the login. So we have the history, so we can use the use navigate again, and then we have the use navigate, and then we can have the handle change also. We have already declared the state, so we have to declare the use state as well. So I will now import the use state from the React, and I have now send request function, so we need to import the axios as well. So axios is now imported, and then we can just import the I think we need to import the box also from the MaterialUI. So it will be MUI material. We need to import the typography as well. So we can import the typography, and then we can import the text field as well. So the text field will also be imported, and we can import the button as well. So the button is also imported, and now instead of the login, instead of the sign up, we can add the login, and then we don't need the name field now because we are in the login now. We only need the email and the password. So I will now remove the name from there, and in the inputs also I will now add here all of these things. Like now the name would not be required here, and now everything would work fine. And now you will see, now we have the send request function, but this time the URL will be not the sign up, the URL will be the login. And now the URL is login, and now we need to add the login request there, and then we need to send the data. So then we can send the data here. So login, we need to send the email and the password after the login. And now in the login request will provide us a token, as we have built the functionality in the backend. So after the login will be completed, we will receive a token from the backend, and it will be attached to the cookie. So if I will now save, and if I will now just move on to the login page, if I will now just refresh, and if I will now just save there everything, now we should see there should not be any errors. Now everything is working fine. And now instead of this sign up, it will be the login. Now the login is completed, and now we need to send here the request. Like we can now send the request at the nikhil@test.com, and then we can add a password as the 111111 as we have declared. So I will now remove everything from this console. Now I will now click on the login, and now we should see if everything is working fine or not. I think there is an error, like the HTTP request, it is a bad request, cannot read properties of undefined data. I think there is an error. So we can just check that error in the network, and we can just check the error in the login. Here is a login request, like the user not found. I think the credentials are wrong. So I now click on the sign up again. So we can just add a new user in the sign up. So it will be the Nikhil, and it will be the email will be like 12345@test.com. And then we can add a password as the 111111. I will now copy this email, and I will now just click on the sign up. So now we are signed up successfully, and now we are into the login, and then we can add the same email, and I will add the same password 111111. So now we should be redirected to the user space, I think. So we can just add here the functionality again, that after the request is completed, then we need to redirect to the user space. So we need to go to send request, so it will be the users. So now if I will now save, so now we should see the screen. So now if everything would work fine, then we would be redirected to the user. If I will now click on the login, so now you will see, now the login is successfully done, and now we are redirected. So now you can see the login is successfully done, and now we are redirected to the user. And then we can now just save this. And if I will now just check the network tab, if I will now click on the login again, I think if I will now click on the login this, now you can see now we are successfully logged in. But if you will check the headers over there, I will now just expand it. So now if I will now just check the headers here, now you can see the status code is 200. Okay, and then you will see access control allow origin. Now it is having the star, which will allow from everywhere, and it is giving us the star. But if you will just check below, now you will see there is a set cookie which we are receiving. So this is a cookie which we are now receiving there into the front end, and this cookie is being set from the backend. So we are getting this cookie in the front end also, but as I discussed before, so if you will access that cookie in the document.cookie, then it will be empty string, because it is not accessible to you in the front end. So we are already secure in that, and I think no any hacker can get or steal a token from there, and we are getting the token only in the HTTP only cookie. So here is our token, EY, and then the token. So here is our token, and we are not storing our token even in the local storage, even in the memory, or in the cookie, or in the session storage. But it is completely secure, and it is not accessible to you, even you as well, because we are there on the front end, and it is not accessible to the front end, and it is completely secure. And then we can just go to the user space to get the user from this token, and then we can just go to the users page now in the welcome page. So now we can just go to the welcome, and then we can just send the request in the welcome. So now we will go to the welcome there. We can just use the function as the use effect. So it will be the use effect. So we need to add the use effect here inside that. So we can just send the request from the use effect. I will add a function there to send the request after that, and the use effect is used to, so once the component is being rendered, so the use effect then will run. So we can use here the, I think we can use here the function at the send request again, and it will be equals to the function again. And then we can use here like we can just send the request as the const response, will be equals to the await. We need to send the request to the axios. Axios, we need to import the axios. So we can import the axios from there. Import axios from the axios. And now the axios is imported, and now we can use the axios.get. So this will be a get function, and now we need to add here the URL. So to http localhost URL will be 5000 /API/user. So after that, once we will send back the response, once we will send back the cookie to the backend, so it will check the token and it will decode the token and it will get the ID and it will send us the user. So this is very long process, but it is a very secure process. And after the user, to send back the data which we receive in the cookie, we need to use here an object, and the object, we have a property of the withCredentials. So we need to use a withCredentials property to the true, and then we need to send the withCredentials request after every request. So we can just add here the defaults in the axios. So we can just add a by default at the axios.defaults. So by default, the axios will send the request with the withCredentials also always. So it will be the withCredentials will be equals to the true. So now we are sending that request, and now we can now just add a catch statement after that. So to the catch, we need to get the error. We can just console.log the error that we have. So now we are having the error, and then we can just add a data variable also, data, and it will be equals to the await, again the response.data. So we will get the data from there, and then we can just return the data. And the send request is the async function always, because we are using the await. So now everything should work fine, and we have already declared the send request, and now I think everything should work fine. And now in the use effect, I will now run this get user function like the send request. So the send request would be there, and we can use a then, and we can use a state variable also to add the user. So it will the use state, as the use state will be there, so we can add a use state as the user and the set user function with that. So the user and the set user, and by default it will be the undefined, and then when we will get the data from that, and then we will use the set user, and it will be the data dot user which we will receive, or we are receiving I think the message from there. So we can just go to the backend to check what we are getting. So we need to go to the controllers, we need to go to the user controller to see what we are sending after the user is successfully logged in. So we are now sending the user there, so we need to get the user. So we can just get by entering the data dot user. So now after the, so then we can add a conditional statement here. So when we will have the user, and then we will just create a h1 tag, and in the h1 tag we will just add the user. So it will be the user dot name. So when we will add the user, so we will just show the user dot name there. So if I will now save, so now we should see the changes onto the screen. So now we are in the Chrome once again. Now you can see there is an error again. So now we need to just refresh the page again there. So now we can just click on the login, and now we can just log in again the user which we have. I will now click on the login. So now we are not redirected to the users page. I think there is some error, and this error is because we are now sending the request from a different URL server, but we are having the access to giving the data and to get the data, but we don't have access to send the cookie to the backend. And to get the access for that cookie, we can go to the app.js once again of the backend, and then after we are requiring the course, then we need to add some origins also, because now we are sending some credentials from the axios, and for that we need to add some properties like credentials, because now we are sending the credentials from the axios. So credentials will be equals to the true to get the credentials, and we need to specify the origin as well. So in which origin we need to send the data or to receive the data. So we can just add the origin as the http/localhost at the rate of the port of the 3000, and we are now sending the data from there. So if I will now save, and if I will now just go to the login screen once again to see if everything is working fine or not, I will now click on the login once again. Now we are redirected to the user, and now you will see now we have the username there. So now we are getting the name of the user, Nikhil, and now it means that everything is working totally fine. So we have now successfully built the most secure backend that we have. and we have already declared everything there. And once, if you will refresh the page after the 30 seconds, so it will be gone. So once you will refresh the page, so now you will see there will be an error, I think. So now you will see there is an error that cannot read properties undefined of data, because now the token is expired. And once you will go to the network, once you will go to the user request, now you will see we have the internal server error. And now if you will just go to response, now you will see the token is now expired and the token is now undefined. So now it means that everything is working totally fine, and we are getting the user in the front end without having their ID in the URL, and with pure credentials, which we are now sending the cookie to the front end and getting the cookie to the backend again. So everything is totally working fine. So this error is coming because the token is getting expired and we are not able to generate the new tokens. So to fix this problem, there are two solutions. The first one is either we can increase the time limit of the token, like an hour or day or any number of days. And second, we can just refresh the token again and again after every request, and it will be a pure authenticated version, because the access token will be then expired and we will be generating the new access token after a time span of every 15 to 30 seconds. And with this approach, the application can be complex, but for the security reasons, we should always have a complete and a secure backend to run the application. So we can move ahead with the second approach. So we can generate a refresh token route in the backend after every 30 seconds. So the token will be then refreshed, and then we will reset the cookie as well. So let's start with this approach, and then we need to go to the backend to complete this approach. So we need to go to the backend folder, and then we need to create a new route after the routes. So we can just create a new route, and after all of the routes, now we can declare a new route with the router. And it will be .get request, and it will be of the slash at the refresh. So it will be the refresh, and then we can just have some functions after there. So we can have the functions in the user's controller. So we can just go and we can just create a refresh token here. So it will be like the const refresh token, and it will be equals to the function. And then we can just have the request, response, and the next there as the variables. So it will the request, response, and the next as the parameters. And then we can just get the cookies like we got from the, I think, the verify token. So we can get these cookies. So the cookie will be then set, and then we can get these cookies from the cookies request.header. So once we will get the cookie from the request.header, and then we can check if we don't have the token. And then we can just check like, so we can declare here the previous token there. So it will the previous token. So if we don't have the previous token, and then we can just return as the response dot status, and the status will be the 400 as the unauthorized. And then we can just send the message at the JSON, and the JSON will contain a message, and the message will be then the couldn't find token. So we can have this message, and then after the token is there, and then in the else case, then we can verify the token like the jwt dot verify. So we can just verify the token with the converting it to the string, and it will be like the string as the previous token that we have. And then we need to compare it with the security key by giving the security key. So it will be like the JWT secret key. And then we can just check the decoded parameters also, like the error. First it will be the error, and then it will be the user, which is decoded now. And then we can just generate the function with there as the callback. And then we can check if there is any error, and then we can just console.log the error. And then we can just also return at the response.status will be equals to like the 403, and then we can just send the error to the user as well as the 403. And then we can just add a JSON, and then it will contain the parameters as the message, and the message will be equals to like we can just send as the authentication failed, because now we have the error, and now the token is not verified. Now we have the, and now we are returning the token if we have any error. But now if the token is successful, because now after the if case, so the if case will run, so the application will break. But Now if we don't have any error, and now if we have the user and the token is successful and it is verified, so we can just clear the cookie by having the response dot clear cookie function, and then it will be the user.id which we will do decoding from the user. So it will be the user which we are decoding dot id. So we will just return the IDs, and then we will return, and then we will just clear the cookie from there. And for the headers also, then we can remove the cookie from the headers also. So it will be the request dot cookies, and it will be like the cookies is objects, so we can just get the key of the user dot id. So we can just get, and it will, and we will just add it to the empty string. So it is the empty string now, and then after everything is done, then we can generate a new token there. So now what we are doing here, we are just verifying the token. If the token is successfully verified, then now we are removing the cookie because the cookie contains a token, and then we will generate a new token as icons, as the token will be equals to jwt again dot sign, and we will sign a new token with the parameter of the id, as which we will receive the user dot id which we have decoded. And then we can just add a parameter after that as a secret key. So we have already defined the secret key, and then we can just use an object, and the object will contain an expires in property again, and we need to define the value as again like the 30 seconds. So it was the 30 seconds. We are now defining the expires in property. So we are already defining 30 seconds in the, I think, in the login as well, as we are defining in the 30 seconds now, you can see. And then we need to define the cookie as well again. So it will be the cookie after that. So after the expiration, so after the token will be created, then we can just regenerate the cookie as well with the response.cookie, and we are now sending the cookie. So now this time this will not be there, so it will be like the id will be user.id. So we are now getting the user.id, and then the token, and then the path is equals to this, and the expire is equal to 30 seconds again, http only true, and everything is fine. And after the cookie is generated, now the most important part, now the cookie is generated and the token is also regenerated, and now we need to again add the request.id which will be equals to the user.id which we have decoded. So now for this id, now we want to move on to the next middleware after that. So now we have the id, and we are now attaching the request.id with the user.id, and now after that we can just move on to the next middleware. And in the next middleware, the next middleware will be again the, I think now after the refresh, the next middleware should be the verifyToken again. So then if we are regenerating the new token, then we need to verify it again, and then we will verify the token again, and we will just console.log. And then after the verification is successful, then we can just move on to the next, and then we can just show the user with the request.id. So this is very complex logic, but it is very good logic for the security reasons. So then we can move on to the route. So after the token is going to the refreshed, then we can run a refresh token. So we need to export the refresh token as well. So it will be export dot refresh token will be equals to the refresh token. So now we are exporting the refresh token as well, and then we are now just adding the refresh token. And after the refresh token, now we will verify the token as well again, verify token. And then after the refresh is completed, verify is completed, and then the final thing will be, which will be the get user. So now we are defining the get user. So if I will now save, and now in the front end, now we need to work in the front end to just send the request after every time span of 30 seconds. So we can just do that. And for the request, so request can take time because it is an asynchronous task. So we can just go to the user controller, and then we can just increase the time limit of the 30 seconds to 35 seconds. So it should be the, it should not be the exact time of that. So we can just remove that, the time span of this, and then we can just remove that time span from the login as well. It will be 35 seconds. So after the 30 seconds, the cookie will, so after that 30 seconds, the cookie will be then removed, and it will remove the token as well. So the again the token will be generated for the 35 seconds, but after the 30 seconds we will just destroy, and we will just create a new token. So we can just move on to the user routes again, and then everything is working fine. And then we need to go to the welcome.js, in which we will send the request. So here in the welcome.js, now we need to generate a new function. Now we need to create a new function as the refresh. So before the send request, I will generate a new function as the refresh token, and it will be equals to a asynchronous function again as the async. and then we can just generate a new response variable again, and the response will be equals to the await, and it will be like the I think the axios which we have imported dot get, and this is a get http request, and then we can just add the refresh is there, and then after the refresh, so I think the route will be refreshed. So the http localhost at the report of the 5000, then API, then refresh. So we will send the refresh as well after that. So if the route will match the refresh, so it will work. So now it is the refresh again, it will work fine. And in the second object, now we need to again send the with credentials, and it will be equals to the true, because we need to send the credentials also to verify the token. And then we can just catch the error. If there is any error, then we can just console.log the error that we receive. So after the response, then we can just get the data again. Response data will get the await at the response.data. So if everything is successful, then we can just get the data, and then we will just return the data. And then after that, now we need to use the set interval method from the JavaScript, and the set interval allow us to do a task after every interval. Like if you will provide an interval of around something like 15 seconds, so it will run a task after every 15 seconds. So we need to do that. So we can just go to the use effects. So for the first render, so I think in the use effect, we need to create a logic that on the first render, we need to render the send request. And after the first render, then we need to render the refresh token. So for the logic, we can just generate a new variable here. We can just create a new variable here before the rendering, and it will be the let as the first render, and it will be by default equals to the false. Or like the first render will be equals to the true, I think. So first render is true, and then we can just check in the use effect, like if we have the first render, and then we need to just send the request to get the user. And after that, we can just use here, like I think we need to just update the first render as well. I like the first render equals to the false. So now for the first render, we are now sending the request to the user, and if the first render is not there, now we can just use here the use effect. Now if the first render is true, and now we are now providing the first render equals to the false, and we are sending the request. And in the else case, we need to do one more thing, like we need to declare a let interval again, interval, and interval equals to the set interval again. So the set interval function is there, and then we can just use here the callback function inside that. And in the second parameter, we need to provide here the milliseconds. So what we need to do in the set interval is we need to run the refresh token function, and then we need to send the data, and then the data which we will receive, we will set user again the data. So the set user will be equals to the data again. So this is the logic of it. And then now we can see now if everything works fine, and now we can add a time span of around something like we are setting up the cookie, we are setting up the token for 35 seconds, and we are setting up the cookie for 30 seconds. So we can just run the refresh token after every something like 28 seconds or 29 seconds. So it will be 1000 milliseconds. So it can be the 28. So after the 28 seconds, now we will send the set interval function. So it will run after every 28 seconds, and then it will run for the refresh route. So everything will work fine. And for that, we need to also just return there something, because we need to add a cleanup function also for the use effect to clean the interval after every 28 seconds. So it can be the clear interval, which is available already in the JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript. So we can just clear the interval which we have defined the interval. So this interval will always be expired after every 28 seconds once the cleanup is completed, and then we will generate a new interval. And then if everything will work fine, then we can just have the user.name again and again. So now I think if everything works fine, so we need to save, and then we can just go to the node again. So I think there is an error. So first we need to remove everything from there. We need to go to the localhost /array 3000, and then we need to just remove the cache as well. So I will remove the cache, and then now we need to run the request. So first we need to go to the login, and I have already saved all of the things. Once I will click on the login, so now you will see now we have the name Nikhil. So now we can just check after every I think 28 seconds if everything is working fine. And now you will see the refresh is getting again, and now you will see the refresh is working, and now we are getting the user. and now the refresh is also working fine. And now we need to fix one thing. So now when we are getting the user from the set user, so we need to add the data.user and not only the user. So it will be the data.user, and then I have just increased the time limit of the 29 seconds for there. So this is some basic fixes, and then we need to go to the user controller, and then we need to add some condition in the login, because this can be a big application, so we need to add some big logics over there. So once the user will log in, then we need to add some conditions. So before creating the cookie, we need to check if the cookie already exists, then we need to remove that cookie, and then we need to generate the new cookie. So if we have the request dot cookies, which we have the object, so if the request dot cookies contains the cookie for the existing user, dot id is there, underscore id is there, which is the MongoDB, and then we need to add the request dot cookies of that user. Again we need to write this thing as this. I think we need to add here into the brackets, and then we need to add, then the existing user dot underscore id will be equals to the empty string. So we will just add the empty string after that cookie. So it means that if we will get the cookie from there, so it will be the empty string, and then we will just regenerate the cookie. So after the token is regenerated, then we can add one more log here to check if everything is working fine. Again we will check again. So it is like the generated token, and it will enter a new line, and then we can add some token after there. So it will be the token which we have recently generated, and then in the refresh token, so we need to go to the refresh token again, and then after the token is generated, and then we will add a regenerated token here again, and then I will add a /n over there to add it into the new line. So now if I will now save, and if I will now just go to the node, and we need to just run the application again, I will now remove everything from there, and now we need to check the logs. So we need to just expand it. Now we can see, now once the user will log in like 12345@test.com, once I will click on the login, now we can see, now we have the Nikhil onto the window, and in the network we can see everything is working fine for the user, and now the response is okay. And then now we can see we have a generated token, and this is a token, it is highlighted, and this is the id. I think we are also logging the id of the user, but now we have to check if everything is working fine, and if the regenerated token and the generated token is different or not, and if the user is currently again logged in or not. So we need to check the refresh route into there. So now we can see we have a refresh route over there, and it contains a user which is the object of the id. So now the response is successful. We can see the header, the get equals to 200, okay, and it is a green light. And then now we can see in the logs also, now the regenerated token is different from there, and in the end it contains a CQA, and it contains a W and MC. So now everything is working perfectly fine. So now we can check in different browsers as well. So I will open an Edge browser here. So I will open that browser, and I will now just send a request from that browser. So it will the localhost 3000. So I have now opened that, and now I will click on the sign up, select a new user as the Nikhil again. The email will be Nikhil thadani@gmail.com. So I have at the email, the password will be same 111111. I will click on the sign up. So now we can see everything is okay, and now we are redirected to login. So I will now add the credentials here, and I will now click on the login again. Now we can see, now we have the user, and now if I will now just click on the inspect here again, so now everything is working fine. Even in the Chrome browser, even in the different user, it is working fine, and even in the Edge browser it is working totally fine. So everything is working fine. So now this is our application which we have built, and now the application is fully complete, but one thing is remaining. So we are storing the JWT key as a constant, but it should not be stored as a constant in any ways. So we should now remove that, and now for that we can install a new package as the .env, which will just store the JWT key in the env file, and the MongoDB password also in the env file. So we can now just create, and we can now just stop the server, and we need to install the .env. So it will be the npm install as the .env to add all of the things in the env, and then we need to configure that also. So after the env is installed, and now we need to move on to the app.js from there, and then we need to just use that. So it will be the require. So it will be directly we are requiring, and now we are now configuring directly. So it will be the .env, which we have currently installed. It has a method of the config. So the config will be there, and now we will call the config. So after that the env files will be working, and in the backend, in the main root file, so we can generate a new file. I think we have to generate a new file as a .env. So now we have generated a new file. So we can just go to the env and we can just set that token to there. So then I will now just copy the token from there and I will now just paste the token to in the env file. So it will be the JWT secret key equals to the my key, and you can define any other key as well. So now I have defined that, and now you can just go to the user, I think app.js, and then you can also store the password of the MongoDB there as the password, as it, and it will be equals to the password, like it to the password, or MongoDB password will be equals to the password which you have just copied. So you can do that, and then in the app.js, instead of this, so you can just use here the template details, and then you can just remove that, add here the like the process .env dot the name, like we have now defined the env name as the MongoDB password, so you can just use that MongoDB password, and then after that you can use here the .env in the users controller in the secret key as well. So whenever we are using the secret key, so we can go to secret key here. So here we can use here the process .env dot, we have the variable as the, I think we have the JWT secret key, so we can just copy that, we can just paste there at the secret key. So now we have used that, and here also in the verify token, so we can use that as the process .env dot the JWT secret key, so we can use that, and here also we need to add that as the process .env dot JWT secret key, and here also we need to do that, it will be the process.env dot JWT secret key. So now everything is working totally fine, and then we can remove that JWT secret key from there also. So I will now remove there, and everything will work same as before. And now the application is almost complete, and the only thing which is remaining now is the logout. So we need to build the logout functionality as well. So once the user will log in, then we need to show logout, and once the user will log out, then we need to show user the login and the sign up. So for that we need to perform some steps in both the applications, in the backend and the front end as well. So in the backend we need to create the controller function as the logout, from where we can just remove the cookies of the user, and in the front end we can just create here the functionality of the login. So when the state is the login, then we need to show user the logout, and when the state is the logout, then we need the login and the sign up buttons. So for that, in the front end we can use the Redux, which will help us to do that. So first we will move on to the front end. First we will work on the front end. We will install the Redux. So it will be the command of the npm install, and we need to install the Redux.js toolkit, which is a Redux library to help us in the React applications. It will be the Redux.js/toolkit, and then after that we need to install the React Redux also. So it will be the React Redux. So we need to install these two packages for the Redux, and then we need to work on the front end first. So in the front end, in the header, now we have the two routes for the login and the sign up, and then we can create one more tab for that, for the logout. So we can just move on and we can just copy and paste a new tab, and the two will be equal to the default route, and then the link component would be same, and the label will be the logout. So now we have created the logout label also. So after the logout route, now we need to wait till the Redux installs, and then we can just create here the store functionality of the Redux. And the Redux is used to create just a central data store, which is only the one data store in the whole application. So it will handle the state of the login and the logout, and then we show the user the changes according to the state. Now the Redux is now installed, and now we can just move on to the source. We can just create a new folder as the store, and then inside the store, then we can just create here a new file as the index.js, which is a file of the Redux, and then we can just import the create slice, and it will be imported from the Redux.js toolkit. So the slice will help us to create the slice, and the slice can contain the name, the reducer functions, the initial state, and everything which we need. So we can just create the slice for the authentication. So it can be the auth slice, and it will be equals to the create slice that we have just imported. And then we can just provide here the name, and name can be the auth, and name should be in the string. And then we can just provide some initial state. So we need to provide the initial state of the application in an object. So it will contain the is logged in, property, and by default in the initial state it will be the false, and after the initial state then we can define some reducers. So it will be the reducer functions now, and it will be an object, and in this object now we can generate the functions. So first it will be the login function, and there is a login function, and then there will be the logout function as well. And then in the login, then we need to get the state as the parameter, and then we can just change the state as the state dot is logged in property will be equals to the true, and then in the logout we can just generate that the state dot is logged in will be equals to the false. So we have now generated the state, and the logout will also contain the state inside that. So in the login we are now changing the state of the login to the true, and in the logout we are now moving back the state to the false. And after that we need to export this slice also. So we can just export the store functionality of the Redux. So we are now exporting the Redux store from having the configure store. So the configure store will be then imported again from the Redux.js toolkit, and it will contain an object. So it will contain the reducers. So all of the reducer will be then exported in there. So we can just export the reducer as the auth slice dot reducer that we have. So we are now exporting the reducer only for the auth slice now, because we only have the one slice in our application, and then we need to just export it. And then for calling these functions, then we need to export the actions also. So we need to export the actions as the auth actions, and it will be equals to the auth slice that we have dot actions. So we need to export the auth slice dot actions here also. And now the Redux store is completed, and now we need to import the Redux store, and then we need to use the Redux store in the application. So then after that we can just move on to the index.js, which is the main file, which is a root file of our application, and then we can just import the provider from the React Redux. So provider will help us to provide some Redux store to the main application. So we can just import the provider from the React Redux that we have installed the package of the React Redux, and then we can just wrap the app component with the provider to provide the Redux functionality over the main app component. And then we can just wrap the app component with the provider, and then we can just provide the store also in the provider. So it will contain the store, and the store will be equals to, and the store will be equals to the store which we have just generated and which we have just exported from the index.js store. So now we have now imported the store from the store index.js. So now the app component has the full functionality of the Redux. So if I will now just save, if I will now just click on the npm start, if I will now just start the server again, and then we need to move on to the app.js also, and then we can just get the store from the use selector hook. So we can just get the state of the is logged in the Redux from the use selector. Will then allow us to grab the state. So we can just use the use selector, and it will contain the state as the parameter, and then we can just grab the state dot is logged in property. So we are now getting the access of the is logged in property from there. And if I will now just console.log the is logged in to check if the state is there or not. So now if I will now save, now we should see the changes to the application. And now the application is compiled, and now if I will now click on the inspect, now in the console, now we should see the state. Now you will see, now we have the Redux state which is the false as of now, because the is logged in is now the false. And now we can just use that is logged in property in the header also. So now we have the 3 routes in there. So we need to check if we have the is logged in. So we can just grab the is logged in here also. So const as the is logged in, and it will be equals to the use selector. So we can just grab the use selector here also. It will contain the state as the parameter, and then we can just grab the state again from the state dot is logged in. So we can just add here some conditional ending. So when the is logged in property will be the true, and then only we need to render this tab. So if I will now save, so now we should see the changes onto the screen once again. So if I will now save, now we should see the changes, like the logout should be removed. So now you will see the logout is now not there, because now the is logged in is false. So the logout is not there. And now we need to create the route in the backend as well for the logout. So we can just move on to the user routes, and then we can just create a new route as the router dot post. so it will be the post request, and the route will be the logout. And then after that we can just create here some controller functions also, so we can move on to the user controller, and then we can just create a new function here as the const logout, and it will be equals to the again the request, response, and the next. And for the logout, I think now we need to get some cookies again, so we can just grab the cookies and the previous token also, so we can just grab that. So I will now just copy from the verify token, and then now you will see now we have the cookies and now we have the previous token, and then we can just check, and now we need to verify it again, so we can just verify it again. So we can just grab the jwt.verify also for that. So I will now grab this, because now we need to verify the token as well once we will receive from the backend, once we will receive from the front end. So now I have now grabbed the jwt.verify, so we will get the token from the cookies again, and then we will just verify the token. So if the token would be then verified, then we are now clearing the cookie, and then we don't need to create a new token again. So I will now remove this from the console.log generated token as well, and then you will see now we have the clear cookie again. So I will now remove this as well and this as well. So now you will see now we are in the jwt.verify. So once the token will be successfully verified, then we need to clear the cookie. So now we are now clearing the cookie, and then we need to just return as the response.status will be equals to the 200, and then .json will be equals to, it will contain the message, and the message will contain that they successfully logged out. So we can just grab that, so we can just save now, and now we can just export the logout route as well. So it will be the exports dot logout, and it will the logout. So now we are exporting the logout as well, and now we need to move on to the routes from the user routes, and then we need to grab here the logout also. So for the logout, first we need to verify the token that we will receive from the front end, verify token, and then we will add the logout. So now everything should work fine. So now we are now importing the logout as well. So now we have imported the logout, so everything now should work fine. And now we have created the logout also, and it will be a post request, and now the backend work is complete, and now we need to move on to the front end again. So we can just move on to the header, and then we can just call here some function on the on click of the logout tab. So it will contain the on click, and in the on click we can now call here the API for the logout. So we can just have here the handle logout function, and then we can just create the handle logout function in the header as well. So it will the const as the handle logout, and it will be equals to the function. And then for that I will now create a new function for sending the request. So it will the const as the send logout request will be equals to a async function, and then we can just import the axios also at the axios. So now we have imported the axios, and now we need to create in some defaults of the axios also. So the axios will contain the defaults as well, because we need to send the credentials also. So the axios, it will be the axios dot defaults dot with credentials. So the with credentials property will be equals to the true, and then we can just send the request. So it will be the const as the response will be equals to the await, because it is an asynchronous task. So it will the await as the axios dot post. So we are now sending the post http request. So the URL will be the http localhost, the port will be 5000, and it will be /API/logout. So this will be the route, and then the second parameter is we need to send here the data. So we don't have any data to send in the logout, so we can just send here the null object. So now we are sending null, and then there in the config options, and then we can just send the with credentials property to the true. So now everything should work fine, and now we can just have a condition like if the response dot, I think the status equals to 200, and then we can just return response there. And then after the if, we can just check, we can just return the new error if there would be an error in the logout. So we can just return the new error as the unable to logout. Please try again. So now we are now sending the return statement if there is any error, and so we can just call this inside the handle logout. So it will send as the logout request, and after calling the send logout request, then we can use the then after that, because this is a promise. And then now we need to update the state in the Redux to the logout. So for that we need to use the use dispatch to dispatch the action. So it will the dispatch will be equals to the use dispatch. So the use dispatch will be then imported from the React Redux, and then we need to dispatch some action like the logout action. So it will the dispatch, and then in the dispatch now we need to just import the auth actions that we have just exported from the Redux. So it will the auth actions dot, then we have the logout functionality over there. So we can just call the logout function from the auth actions. So after the login request, then we are sending the logout request, and then we are moving ahead, and then we are just going to the main route, which is the localhost 3000 only. So if I will now save, now we can check the application again. I think there is an error. So use dispatch is not defined, so I think use dispatch is not imported. So we can just import it again. So now the use dispatch is also imported. Now we can see there is no any error, and now we can move on to the application again, and I will refresh again, and now you can see initially it is false. Once I will click on the login, I will now log in. Now you can see now we have the user, and now the login is working fine, and we don't see the logout route here because I think we are not dispatching the action on the login. So we can just move on to the login again, and then we can just create the dispatch again, like the const dispatch. So we need to dispatch the login action here also. So it will use dispatch again. So use dispatch will be then imported, and then after the login is done, after the handle submit is done, and then we are now going to the history user, and before this then we can just use on the then again, and then this will be a callback again. So we need to dispatch here the action again. So it will be the auth action, auth actions we will then import, and it will be the dot login function. So we will call the login function there after that. And then if I will now just remove here the user again, and then we can just restart the application. Now we should see there should not be any errors. So once I will click on the login, I will now refresh again, open the developer tools. Now once I will click on the login, now if I will now click on the login, now we can see now we have the login state of the true, now we have the Redux state of true, and now you can see now we have the logout route as well. And once I will click on the logout, and now you can see now the logout route is completed successfully. And then if I will now just check the network tag also, now you will see the logout tab is successfully created, and now the status equals to 200, which is okay, and now everything is working fine. And now we need to fix one more thing. When we are now logged in, and then we can still see the login and the sign up, so we can just move on to the header again. We can just conditionally render these two tabs as well. So we can just add here the condition for the if the logged in is false, if the is logged in is the false, and then only we need to render the tabs. So we can just wrap the tabs inside the empty component as well, empty tags as well. So now we are checking that if the is logged in property is false, and then only we need to render these two links, and now everything is working fine. And we have still only thing which is remaining, because if I will now click on the logout, and if I will now just move on to the URL, and if I will now just directly access the user, so now you will see we are now able to go to the user, and it will throw us an error, because it is showing us an error because we don't have any credentials and we are still moving on to the user. So we need to fix that also. So for that we can just move on to the app.js, and then we need to just create this route as the protected route. So we can just create that. So we can just create by the is logged in. So once the is logged in equals to the true, and then only this route will work. So this is the new condition, that if the is logged in property is true, and then only we are able to render this route. If I will now save, so now we should see if everything would work fine. Now you can see if I will now refresh the page again, if I will now just enter the user route without the login, what will the /user. So now you can see the error is now gone because it was sending the HTTP request, and then you can see now the no routes match for the location user, because now we are currently not is logged in. Now we are logged out, and once I will click on the login, If I will now click on the login, now you can see we are now moving ahead to the user, and once I will click on the logout, now we are moving ahead to the main route. So now everything is working totally fine. So we have now just created the full application. So congratulations on completing this course, and I hope you have learned a lot from this course. So thank you. So now we have completed the application, and we were able to build a secure backend for our application with the JWT authentication, and with sending the cookies, and with sending the HTTP cookies to the front end. And then we were able to build a secure front end where the cookies are not accessible to any hacker and not even you as well. And we were able to send back the cookies which we will receive from the backend to the backend as well. And the token now cannot be accessed on the front end, and even the ID of the user cannot be accessed on the URL routes on the front end. And still we were able to get the details of the user, and hence we were able to build the advanced authentication and authorization project on the MERN Stack. So thank you for enrolling on this course, and I hope you have learned a lot from this course. So please subscribe to my channel, and please like the video as well, so that I can be motivated to post the videos like this and to propose new topics like this. So thank you.